take a moment to silence your electronic devices. The program will begin shortly.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of ASU+GSV. My name is Leah Belsky, and I'm the GM for Education at OpenAI, and I am joined here with Bojena, who is a VP of Learning at Duolingo. She's also a learning scientist by training. And before we kick off, we are going to play a quick video.
Introducing Video Call, a new way to practice your language skills.
Oh, hey. How's your job going?
Hey Lily, it's going super well.
Nice. What's your favorite thing about work these days?
Probably my colleagues. I really like working with them.
That sounds like my nightmare. Anyway, I gotta go. Bye for now.
Practice real-world conversations stress-free with Lily on Duolingo.
Awesome. So Bojena is going to tell you a little bit more context about this video. But the reason why we invited Duolingo and Bojena here today is because they are a company who was very early out of the gate with Speak and others really pushing the boundaries of how AI could be used for learning. And they did so in a way that not just drove efficiency and saved cost, but they added new value to learners, and they drove their company's revenue up to the moon. And that is a beautiful shining star for this community. And so, Bojena, I would love if you could start off by introducing yourself and just tell us actually a little bit more about that video we just saw.
Thank you, Leah, for the introduction and for playing the video. So my name is Bożena, VP of Learning at Duolingo. My background pre-Duolingo is really academic. I have a PhD in linguistics and cognitive science. My research was on how people learn, especially how people learn languages, and how we can optimize learning to make it work better. I also did a lot of teaching, including teaching languages, curriculum design during graduate school. So that was all perfect training for my job at Duolingo, where I brought my expertise to design learning experiences that would be fun and effective. So really motivating to learners, but also making sure that they actually work and they teach you something. And this video that you saw, this is something that we are very, very excited about. When the LLM technology arrived, we immediately got very excited because we always wanted to add this functionality to our app that would allow learners to practice conversation. When you're learning a language, that's really what you want. You want to actually be able to speak. And we really couldn't do it. We tried different things before, but it just felt too scripted. It never felt quite like the right experience. And so when we saw this technology, we realized this is our moment. This is when we can actually bring something, develop something that will add a lot of value to our product. It will give learners practice with actual conversation. And that's what it is. It's still early on. We are still developing this feature, but it's out there. Learners are using it, and you can just have a conversation with Lily, who's one of our characters. She's this kind of bored, unimpressed teenager who's fun to talk to. I'm very excited about it. I use it almost every day to practice my Italian. So very, very excited to have this technology.
Awesome. So Duolingo is obviously ahead of the curve, and you have this key problem that you were trying to solve, which is that to learn a language, you need to practice it. And most people can't go around and find a native language speaker to practice with, let alone someone who will like sit with them for hours and hours with mediocre Spanish. And you said, well, let's see if we can use AI to solve that and build a product that would serve that function. So tell us about the early phase of the journey. What was it like to start experimenting with the OpenAI models early on? What did those experiments look like? When did you decide that you were ready to actually scale a product?
We jumped on this technology really immediately. We were so excited. Initially, first of all, we started thinking about the key problems that we wanted to solve for our learners. We saw a lot of potential in this technology. And so one thing that we immediately thought about is, okay, how can we get learners to produce language, to have conversation? Initially, we started with just written conversation. That's much easier for learners, especially when they are earlier in their learning journey, to converse in writing. In speaking, the added time pressure really makes it much more difficult. So initially, we experimented with those written conversations. We also used this technology to try to give learners better feedback and more personalized feedback, because LLMs, we immediately saw that they can explain your mistake. They can give you more context in a way that just wasn't feasible for us to do before. So the way it looked initially was we internally started playing with the technology, started just prototyping a lot of different things, just to see what feels right, what doesn't. That's generally our process. We generally prototype a lot internally. We test it. We trust our intuitions about what we like about an experience, what we don't like. And then we try to give it to our learners to see what resonates, what breaks, what's working, what's not working. And we keep iterating. And so from the beginning, now I guess over 2 years ago when this happened, we started this prototyping, and we're still iterating on those features. Video call with Lily came in a little later, but the process was exactly the same, prototyping, trying to do different things, different angles, and we continue iterating on it.
And so you jumped in, you started iterating, but you didn't actually have prompt engineers in-house. You didn't have AI engineers. You had a team of learning scientists. So tell me about the story of, like, what role did you and your team in particular, the learning scientists, play in this journey? And how did you actually take this tech company that didn't have in-house talent and allow them to be AI powered?
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is, I'm just so proud of us, how we approach this, because my team, these are experts who I hired, experts in learning, in teaching, educators, who before AI, or at least before the advent of LLMs, they were the ones who designed our curricula. They were the ones who thought carefully about our courses, our content, how to sequence the material. They were writing the exact content for our courses, which was all very, very slow, but we put a lot of attention into it. And then with LLMs, we realized that this role is going to change. This technology is going to be powerful for our product, for features like conversational practice, but it's also going to be powerful for all other aspects of course design, content creation, where we can use LLMs to generate content, for example. And my team basically learned how to amplify their own expertise by working directly with LLMs. And so they are the ones who have become our main prompt engineers. They work directly with LLMs. They are the ones who write evaluators for LLMs to make sure that whatever we create, the content or conversational features, that all of that works and pedagogically is sound. So initially they did not have that expertise, but we allowed them time to really play with it. Them and the rest of the company. We gave them protected time to really dive into this technology, play with it initially. We gave everyone easy access to it, and told them, you know, just try it out, figure out how to make this work, how to use it so that your job is easier, so that you don't do the more manual tasks like writing content. Instead, use LLMs, write prompts that will have LLMs do that for you, but you need to think critically now about how to guide LLMs. And so my team has become very impactful in this area because they, as educators, they know exactly what the requirements are for teaching, how we should be thinking about designing experiences for different proficiency levels, what's going to be too overwhelming for learners, how we should be scaffolding the whole experience. They are the ones who know this, and so they are the ones who are able to articulate all those requirements, all those constraints, and give it to LLMs so that LLMs generate what we want and then evaluate that. And so they articulate all of that, and that's why they are able to have a lot of impact. Anyone can prompt, but not everyone has this expertise in pedagogy, in teaching, to be able to really instruct LLMs in this way.
I thought that was pretty cool that Božena's team, the learning scientists, were the ones who became the prompt engineers for this product, and they were also the team that does the evaluations and makes sure that Lily teaches in a reasonable, effective way. So let's actually double click there. There's a lot of discussion about AI safety and about keeping users safe and about making sure that the LLMs don't respond in a way that's dangerous. How do you actually, like, Lily's striking because she's dark and she's sardonic and she kind of insults you, and like you kind of wonder what she's going to say next, but how do you actually make sure that she doesn't go off the rails and say anything harmful?
We do a lot of testing. So we think a lot about this because we want to make sure that learners have a great experience and doesn't go off the rails. And so we think very carefully about how to constrain Lily and constrain for any other feature what to do to make sure that it all stays within our constraints. And so we do a lot of internal testing where we build in certain constraints, we test it, we write evaluators for different things. Some of them are about pedagogy, so we want to make sure, well, the content is accurate, it's at the right level. But some of them really are about inappropriate language, for example, making sure that those kinds of things don't appear. We look at certain biases. We try to write different evaluators for all those things, and we test. And then we go back and make sure that we revise our prompts to produce the results we want, and we don't release things to our learners until we're confident that nothing is going to break. So that's something that we pay a lot of attention to.
So I've been in this space for a long time and was not at OpenAI when a lot of the recent frontier models launched. And one of the big fears, I think, in this community, and particularly with startups, is that the frontier models are just going to sort of reinvent and reproduce some of the products that the EdTech companies are building. And I think particularly in that first year after ChatGPT launched, you could come to ASU+GSV and there were 10,000 tutors and 10,000 coaches and so many beautiful innovations, but that then got absorbed into the next round of intelligent LLMs that came out. So how do you think about that challenge? Like, how does Duolingo think about how do you stay apace and build in a direction that's not going to be in a direct collision course with the core models?
That's definitely something we think a lot about, because in the end, everyone is going to have access to the same technology. How do we make sure that what we build is different, offers some value beyond just what the models can do? And something that Duolingo has always specialized in is motivating learners, engaging learners. This is something that over the years we've really perfected in the app. We've developed all kinds of mechanics and the way we design courses in general. We just are very intentional about making sure nothing is too overwhelming. Everything is properly scaffolded. Everything feels delightful. There's so much delight in the app. There's the fun aspect. Making sure that when learners are on Duolingo, they enjoy it. They enjoy the learning experience. And so that's something that we're trying to bring into the product with AI as well. So we use AI as the foundation, but then there's a lot of work that we do to make sure that the features we're building that are powered by AI, they are now transformed to also be just like the rest of Duolingo, to be very motivating, to be fun. Well, that's why there's a conversation, the video call with Lily, this teenager who's not just a random bot. We're really trying to build her personality so that you really want to talk to her. You want to be her friend. You want to get to know her. This is all very intentional, and that's where, so we're going deeper and deeper into that. How can we flesh out Lily as a personality? How can we make sure that the whole experience is at the right level? That's where, again, my team comes in. They think very carefully about what Lily talks about depending on the level that you're at. When you make mistakes, how does Lily adjust to your level in a way that feels good, you're motivated to keep going? So that's just a big chunk of work that goes on top of the models, making sure that the whole experience is unique. It's unique to Duolingo, and it fits in the whole product in that it's highly motivating, it's highly engaging, it's just a lot of fun.
So what would be your advice And honestly, I get called like weekly by VCs who want to double check that they're investing in the right direction in EdTech and startup founders. What would be your advice in a few words to either VCs or founders who are looking and have a great idea but don't want to build something unique and differentiated?
Well, definitely think carefully about what is it that you're bringing to the table. What is your point of view on the experience? What is it that you want to create? Don't just create what everyone is creating. Think about, well, what is the value added? And then the way I would say to do it is try to really play with the technology. Try to just have a look, try different ideas. Give everyone in the company, on your team, give them access to the technology. Help them prototype things. One thing that we do regularly at Duolingo is hackathon. So, for example, there's one happening this week, a 3-day hackathon that's specifically focused on AI. We just encourage people to use AI in whatever way they want, to just come up with something different, something exciting, something that makes their life easier. And we give them tools. We train them. We've had a series of trainings leading up to the hackathon so that people feel comfortable with the different tools. And then we give them that protected time, 3 days. Nothing else is happening in the company. Everyone is just playing with the technology. And this way, you allow people to be creative, and then you can really see what comes out of it. And you can see, okay, this is maybe the unique value we can provide in our product. But I would say that's important. You engage everyone. You make it easy for them to use the technology, to really figure out what's even possible, and they can only do that if they have a chance to play with it a lot, and then be intentional about what you invest in. That it is something that's differentiating you, where you have that strong point of view that, okay, this is something that we believe in, and this is something we want to invest in.
So you're beginning to tell us a little bit about the culture and Duolingo. One thing I've always wondered is you built this really bold brand, and I think Lily is like a great example of that brand. And there's other different, I don't know what you call them, characters or emojis, but if you go onto Etsy or Reddit, you can like buy the Duolingo characters and their stuffies, and it's a whole world of crazy weird characters. How does that actually impact the culture, and how does the vision for this brand come to life within Duolingo? What's it like to work there?
It's what you might expect by our brand. It's a lot of fun. I think from the very beginning, I've been at Duolingo now for 10 years, so it's been a long time since Duolingo was very tiny. And initially, we really were just having fun and playing with things, and before we even knew how we would ever become a successful business. And somehow that culture of just playing, not taking ourselves too seriously, got preserved, even now when we are around 900 people. And so people are just people are really nice at Duolingo. People really want to help each other, and they just have fun together. They socialize. We have a lot of team events, a lot of parties, and that really helps collaboration. That really helps that creativity, where people feel like it's safe. It's just allowed. It's encouraged to just have crazy ideas and go with them. And you can see this with our marketing, or if you've seen our TikTok. It's very creative. And internally, really what this looks like is people really feel like they can go with whatever ideas. They can try things out. They know that if they have a great idea, we're going to support them too. We're going to invest in it. So it really is this nice environment where where people collaborate in a way that's just very, very impactful because they don't feel constrained by, I don't know, I'm not sure. In other companies, maybe things just aren't as flowing easily. I think Duolingo is just very, very fun, very creative.
And you guys are growing like crazy. I think you announced something like 40% year-over-year revenue growth, which on their base is just absolutely tremendous. So tell us a little bit about what it's like scaling. So you clearly have a culture that's embracing AI in many dimensions, from hackathons to the product. You have a team. Are you growing your team significantly? Are you growing your headcount? How do you think about actually internal automation, efficiency? What's the impact of AI internally?
Definitely AI has made us think a lot about the future and, okay, should we be hiring many more people? We've always been very conservative in hiring. We've been growing fast in terms of the headcount, but never crazy. We've always been very intentional on talent density and making sure that the people we hire them for the long run. We don't want to overhire and then let people go. And so now with AI, we are definitely thinking about it. Okay, what does it mean? Should we stop hiring? Should we slow down? We're definitely not going to stop. We're going to continue hiring people, but we're going to be a little bit more intentional, thinking about what roles really are going to impact our business. What are the gaps? Where do we need to put people? And where maybe we don't, because AI can help fill those gaps. For my team, we have been hiring experts for other subjects. Maybe you have heard Duolingo has been expanding beyond languages to math and music. We're thinking about other subjects. And so we have been hiring, for example, educators for those subjects. But in general, we are trying to be more intentional about it. And when we hire, we think about how can we hire people who are very versatile? How can we hire people who are going to be now able to use this new technology and be excited about it? And so that's what we prioritize.
So you mentioned math and music, and I thought that was pretty awesome. If you think about how fun the Duolingo language learning experience is, what would it be like to create something similarly enjoyable for math and music? But as I was walking over to this room, someone ran up to me and they were like, "Why are you having a conversation with Duolingo? They are a gaming company. They're focused on making you feel good and feel like you're accomplished something every day." And the person actually told me, she's like, I have a grandfather, and he's so excited. He uses Duolingo every day, and he's focused on his streaks, but he can't speak a word of French. And basically what the person was saying, she's like, I don't think Duolingo actually cares about learning. They care about giving you a sense of like fun and enjoyment and personal growth and self-development. But now you're talking about math and music. So what do you actually think of that critique? Does Duolingo care about actual learning and actual outcomes, or is it like an awesome, fun, addictive, exciting game?
Well, great question. I mean, the fact that I work at this company and I've hired a whole
He's a learning scientist, remember, okay?
and I hired a whole team of educators. I think this is good evidence that we care. We care about learning. We care about teaching. That's what I think about all the time. How do we make sure Duolingo isn't just a fun game, but it actually teaches you something? It is a tricky balance because motivating learners is very important, and I've definitely learned that over the years. I kind of always knew, okay, motivating learners is important, but working at Duolingo, I realized just how important it is. It's so difficult to keep people's attention. I mean, we all know that. We're so busy. It's so hard to fit in any kind of learning into our daily routines. And so what we're trying to do at Duolingo is make it easy for people to use, even if it's just a few minutes every day, and trying to help people build that habit. Consistency is so important. But then within those few minutes, if you use Duolingo for a few minutes, it's my job to make sure that you actually get something out of it. And so that's what I think about. That's what my whole team thinks about. And the company invests in general a lot in just how we teach. So it's not just my team. We have a whole large area, multiple teams, just focusing on improving how we teach. And so these are cross-functional teams. There are a lot of engineers, product managers, product designers, learning scientists, learning designers, and we all work together on making sure that our product teaches. And so we've been doing that for language, and now we think about the same for math and music. It's always a balance. We're trying to always stay in this realm of what's going to be engaging while at the same time teaching you something. And the way I think about it is, my background is largely in cognitive science, understanding how we learn, understanding how our memory works, attention, how our brain processes information and retains it in the long term. And so I try to bring in that research. I try to think about how we design our experiences in such a way that you might not realize that you are learning, but over time, you are. Over time, your brain picks up on certain patterns that we're showing you, and you internalize them. And so that's what we've been trying to do for language, and now we're trying to apply the same methodology for math, for music. We'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Well, I'd actually love to learn a little bit more about how you're thinking about math and music. I mean, math is a field that so many people in this, teaching math better is a field that so many people in this community have taken on. And just last night, I was talking with folks at Carnegie Mellon who are really designing new AI-driven math experiences, and we have math tutors and just so many different attempts at cracking math education. How are you going to approach it, and what's different?
We're trying to approach it the same way we've approached language. We feel like we've figured out a lot of things about how to motivate our learners. And so yes, math, there's so many different products for math, and we are trying to do things a little bit differently in that we're really focusing on making it fun, making it feel like, you're not learning something that's difficult. You are just having fun. It's not easy. We're still working on it. We're still figuring out how to do it. But that's the intention. We want to help learners, just like when you're learning language, we want it to feel like you're just enjoying the experience. You're just having fun. You're playing a game. So we do want you to feel that, but we want you to actually, going through a lot of exercises, to learn it. And math is interesting because, just like in language, a lot of repetition is necessary for you to internalize certain rules, certain patterns. And so we feel like the Duolingo method is actually going to work very well. We're going to be able to help learners do a lot of math exercises, and that's really necessary. And we're going to make them feel like they can do it. We want to boost their confidence. We want them to feel like, they are able to do it. They are good at math. So that's something that's definitely on our mind. How can we make sure that people lose that anxiety that often exists when it comes to math? And we feel that our product, our characters who are there to cheer you up, all of this is going to help.
Well, I'm super excited to see what you build, both in math and in music. And music's a fascinating field because it is just like absolutely tremendously large market all around the world. And I think there's been limited amount of technical innovation. in that space. So, Bozena, I would love to turn the tables a little bit. You have built something truly beautiful. I'm newer at OpenAI. One of the things that really blew me away when I first came inside was to realize that learning is one of the major activities that people are going to ChatGPT for. I think between like 20 to 40% of all messages on the platform are connected to schoolwork or learning or something education related. And there's a lot of people in this community trying to figure out like what that means. What are the implications? Is the learning activity that people are doing on ChatGPT is it actually driving real learning? Is it making their brains have to work harder? Is it driving cognition? And how do we as an educational community, knowing that a third of all college students today are using AI every day, make sure that when we bring AI into the classroom or into the university that it will help students learn? And so I'm curious, what advice do you have for this community, either me at OpenAI or educators, and how to guide users to use ChatGPT in a way that actually drives learning?
It's a great question. And part of it is what I said earlier. I feel like it's really important to make sure that we make it easy for everyone to use the technology. And so make it available. Really provide people with some with training, with mentorship on how to get started. People generally, there is this anxiety. I feel like everyone has it whenever you start you're faced with some new tool, new technology, how to actually use it, and so there's some element of fear, and so making it easy, demystifying it for people, giving people opportunities to mentor others. This kind of social collaborative learning, I think, helps people come up with new ideas. And so that would be just my first piece of advice. Just involve everyone immediately in using this technology, and share among yourselves how you're using it and how it makes your job easier. What are the different possibilities? Sometimes it's just one of the blockers is not even knowing what the possibilities are. And so allowing people to just even see different examples of what can be done can spark more creativity.
So do you use LLMs to learn at all, personally?
Yeah, I do. I love to chat with LLMs, ask questions, help me brainstorm some things, help me with writing. I throw in some notes and then try to figure out how to say things in a better way. But mostly I found it really helpful clarifying my own thinking. So asking GPT about something, for example, and then see what comes out, see if I can dig deeper into some parts that maybe I don't understand. And so this kind of back and forth, I think has been amazing for me, and I definitely hope that we're going to leverage these kinds of discussions with LLMs for educational purposes.
Well, thank you very much. I know we are all watching to see what else you guys build. I think math, transforming music, continuing to transform language. There's so much that you're doing. You are a beautiful example for this community, and I'm really glad that the future of prompt engineering and building at Duolingo is driven by a learning scientist. So let's give Bozena a round of applause.
Thank you.
Please take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes.
Hello. All right. Do you need a microphone?
Yeah, we need a mic.
We're down a mic.
Although I kind of like that she doesn't have a mic. That would be great.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. So, thank you so much for being here. My name is Alex Grod. I'm the founder of The Disagreement. We are a media company dedicated to enabling healthy, productive conversations across lines of difference. So, you know, clearly a need for that in our current moment, in our current culture. This is going to be a live recording of our podcast. So, if you like it and want to listen again, we'll release this in the next week or two. Just quick housekeeping, and then I will introduce our two esteemed disagreeers. This is going to be about 40 minutes. This is going to be a speed round for us. Normally, we record on the podcast 75 to 90 minutes, so we're just going to get into it, and it's going to be amazing. Second, this is not a formal debate, okay? So it is not, you know, you have 1 minute, and then you have 1 minute. This is an organic, free-flowing disagreement. Sort of picture what you would have, like, you know, at the corner of a party after a few glasses of wine. That's what we're going to be trying to replicate here. And with that, before we begin, how many of you, raise your hand, if you have either children or loved ones in your life that are navigating the college process currently or will be navigating the college process in the near future? Show of hands. Okay, so that's some pressure on the two of you to really be helpful here, and here we go. So, our two guests today on The Disagreement. Is college worth it? First, Dr. Bridget Burns. Clap it up for Dr. Bridget Burns, please. This is I'm doing very short bios for both of you. You have, you know, relatively lengthy resumes. So, Dr. Bridget Burns is the founding CEO of the University Innovation Alliance, a consortium of public research universities operating as a national laboratory for student success and innovation. Clap again. Yeah, that's cool. All right. Since 2014, she has helped UIA campuses produce 143,000 additional graduates, increasing the number of low-income graduates by 41% and graduates of color by 89%. All right, yeah, look, a three-clapper. We got to get going, so keep it to one or two for Ryan.
I don't want any claps.
Okay, no claps. Ryan Craig is the managing director at Achieve Partners and was formerly a managing director at University Ventures. He is the author of a number of books, including most recently, Apprentice Nation, How the Earn and Learn Alternative to Higher Education Will Create a Stronger and Fairer America. Okay, one clap, there we go. With that, we are just going to get right into it. We're going to start at a high level, and then we'll sort of systematically unpack and flesh out all the arguments. But here we go. Bridget, is college worth it?
Well, obviously, I thoroughly believe it is worth it, and I think the real question here is worth it for whom, right? It obviously needs to improve in terms of its ability to turn around really measurable ROI in terms of economic value in the lives of individuals, but we also have to evaluate it collectively. Like, we want to live in a society of educated people because they vote 50% more, they live 7 years longer, they contribute more to society. For every dollar invested in higher education, 4 goes back into the economy, right? Like, they pay more taxes. Like, there's just so much more. Also, more than half of all the actual research happening in society is happening at colleges and universities. So I think for all of us, we're in a better space. College, yes, definitely worth it for society. For the individual, we definitely need to improve and refine. And I also think that college, like, I run a group of I work for a group of institutions who are actively refining, transforming, and improving. So I'm 100% say that we have definitely made missteps in the past, and we can improve upon it. We are doing that work now. There is clearly a need for us to serve people better, more effectively, more efficiently. We need to serve a wider swath of the population. College is no longer just for 18 to 22-year-olds. It has to actually take seriously our responsibility in society about the economic competitiveness of society and the preservation of our democracy. I think college is absolutely worth it, 100%. I'm not interested in defending for-profit education that has damaged the lives of millions of people in the past. I'm talking about good old American community colleges and universities, what they actually do, and that includes a wide array of things, including some of the smaller skill-based things that I'm sure my friend over to the right, who is, a vocal defender of apprenticeships, will talk about. And I just, as I turn back to you for you to defend, I just want to, I don't know if you know this, but Ryan is definitely someone who is living the embodiment of apprenticeships, because he went to an apprenticeship at, was it Yale? Yale?
And we're off.
Touche, absolutely. Well, I'm going to disagree without being disagreeable. But in terms of just the numbers, the sheer numbers, if you look at, for every 100 students who make the decision to enroll and matriculate into a accredited post-secondary institution, about a quarter, of those who make the decision to matriculate, nearly half are not completing their degree program, and those who complete, over half are underemployed upon graduation. So you actually, of those who matriculate, only about a quarter are actually achieving the result that they had hoped for, which is a good first job, a job that actually required the investment of time and money and debt in most cases in the degree. So if you look at it in that way, just the sheer numbers, for most people it's not worth it, right? If you were to say, like, take the Rawlsian position.
You think they got college? You think that if they tried and they went to college and they didn't actually complete because the institution was not designed around them and because they dropped out, you're saying that is what you're evaluating, is those who went to college and got no degree?
Well, right. If they drop out of no degree, I don't believe there are stats on sort of what the employment outcomes are of stop-outs and dropouts, but they're not good, and they're worse than those who completed and are underemployed. So it's not working for most. Certainly not working for all. You would agree with that. It's not working for most. So is it worth it as currently constituted, as currently structured? It is not. I have sent my eldest son to college. I did attend college. I love college. In fact, my very first job as a teenager was working for a college. My mother was a community college professor back in Canada. My first job out of law school was working for our mutual mentor, Michael Crow, godfather of this.
Which one do you think he's going to like after today? The one who defends the thing he does?
Yeah. No, look, I think that we are, it's not worth it for most people today the way it's currently structured.
All right, let's quickly define the key term here, which is worth it, okay? So I've spent the past week sort of getting up to speed on this debate. I'm a K-12 guy. And I would say 99.9% of the conversation around whether or not it's worth it is economic ROI driven. So Bridget, when you think about worth itness, is it purely an economic calculus, or are there other factors that you are thinking in that definition?
I mean, well, it's so much more than just numbers and dollar value. And as much as my homeboy to the right really wants to just spend all his time thinking about Georgetown's education and the workforce data, and it's just about dollars, I think anyone who's living in America right now understands how much you want to live in a society where people actually understand how to listen to other people's ideas, how to be nimble and malleable, and how to adapt in terms of how they think. And I think, especially as we're thinking about AI, it's about learning critical thinking. It's about exposing you to a broader type of people and getting out of your bubble that you grew up in. There's so much more that is about the richness of really the awakening of the soul for a person. I would say first off, the word college is actually the word to be defined, because it is a broad, diverse, there are so many types of colleges, and yes, those that are underserving people, that are leaving them in worse condition than they came in, should be shut down. That is, I am not interested in defending that. I am, however, I want to be very clear that you clearly believe that if they were successful, that it would be worth it. So then let's have that debate about how to improve the experience and the likelihood of success, because I think that's a very different, and I think you and I have a lot of common ground there. But sorry, back to the point, yes, it's not just economic returns. As someone who grew up in poverty in rural Montana, and higher education completely changed my life, I am very aware of the fact that there's a lot of rich people who are at conferences like this who always want to prescribe apprenticeships for poor people's kids, but not for their own. And I just think that it's absolutely a problem that we should be thinking about who is affected.
Fourth clap. Let's get Ryan in here.
You know, the problem is that we just don't have enough alternative sources. Why? Like, I agree with you. All of those values that you just cited are really critical values. Why is America in the place it's in today? I would suggest it's in the place it's in today because we have done a terrible job as a country at redistributing the gains from trade and helping dislocated workers and dislocated communities and telling them that there's one pathway here, which is college, classroom, tuition, debt, and no guaranteed employment outcome. And guess what? More than half of America doesn't think that works anymore. So, like, why are we in the, like, all of those values are good, but if we could figure out how to address this issue of displacement, displaced workers, displaced communities, economic mobility in a more efficient, effective way, I think we could actually get to those values more effectively. The fact is, as a nation, we have dramatically overinvested in classroom-based, tuition-based, debt-based career launch infrastructure. We have dramatically underinvested in earn and learn career launch infrastructure. And you just look at other countries. They are an order of magnitude or two higher in terms of their investment in earn and learn career launch infrastructure. We have put everything on red, right? We've put all our chips on this one model for career launch, and it has not served us well. It is not serving us well. College is great if it works, and it's not working for most people the way it's structured today.
It definitely has to improve, yeah. I would also, I love how Achieve Partners, how many people who've gotten apprenticeships are employed there? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, is that I actually think higher education has a role to play in all of this. I work with institutions who are actually talking about pulling, like integrating apprenticeships. There are more dynamic models. I think higher education has to innovate. That's why I work with the most innovative institutions. Right. Those that are not willing to adapt and evolve, then we actually have to talk about consequences. But in the end, you are right, and the public is right about the need for ROI.
You're talking about on an institution by institution level, and the reality is that it's not black and white like that. The vast majority of institutions have programs that are working actually pretty well right now. And your institutions probably have a dozen programs each that don't work very well. But they continue to run these programs and enroll students in these programs and take tuition from these students and have students take on debt and are generating negative economic outcomes, even from those who graduate.
I get what you're talking about, the USC example that everyone keeps trotting out, which is like for a counseling degree that costs so much and has little reward.
Not just graduate programs.
It's more of a trope that we trot out.
Too.
And I would just say, I am not going to defend that behavior, but I do think we have to change the decision-making calculus about what we offer. I think it is insane that people can offer a program because a faculty member just wants to teach a class. There has to actually be a role that someone is going to need to fill or a skill that they need to apply. There needs to be a different way that we analyze and decide. And the problem is you're leaving college presidents, that is the hardest job that you could possibly do right now.
Absolutely.
And we are making it more difficult when we don't understand the complexity of the decision-making process and help actually chart a path forward together, which is, yes, there should be economic return and we should be held accountable. My institutions are committed to not just doing that, but also improving value and ROI. That work is a lot murkier, and we actually need to think less baby bathwater and more how do we actually build it by
everything that UIA is doing, I think, is absolutely like in line with the stuff that we believe. But the point is that it's not working great right now. If you actually map, this is data from Strata 6 or 7 years ago, if you look at the top 6 most popular majors that students, undergraduates major in when they graduate, and you map those to the top 6 most popular jobs that they take, there is no correlation whatsoever. So we have this giant swirl of students who are trying to find their way out of these degree programs. No connection whatsoever, and it's because colleges and universities have not been held accountable for employment outcomes. If you ask a college or university, what are your employment outcomes? Most of them will say, oh, we survey our graduates 9-12 months after they graduate, and those who respond, 85% inform us that they're either employed or in graduate school, but we have no idea what they're doing. And I don't blame the schools. The government, the funder, and the accreditors aren't making that.
Someone matriculating to college, it's different than it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago. Paul Tuff in the New York Times calls it going to college used to be like a treasury bond. You know, you were going to get a very clear, safe payout, and now it's like more like a casino, depending on what your major is, whether you finish, what the opportunities, your socioeconomic demographic or racial demographic. So there is an economic ROI issue. I think your position, and I'm just trying to summarize for the audience, is that we should be focusing on reforming the institutions to address those issues. And so you're talking about curriculum, updating curriculum, making it more in line, having better workforce training embedded in the curriculum. And Ryan, your theory of change is to, you know, supplement with earn-to-learn apprenticeships.
Honestly,
so
create competition. I mean, I've been, my career has been in and around higher education, and one of my favorite sayings is, no one has ever gone broke betting against the pace of change in higher education. Bridget is doing her darndest to try and accelerate these institutions, her coalition of the willing, but that's a small fraction of the schools we're talking about. There are many schools who are not in that coalition and are not changing, and right now are, you know, frozen and probably not going to innovate for the next 3 years because of all the crises that this government has brought to them. And meanwhile, they're going to enroll hundreds of thousands of additional students who are not going to generate an economic return, be underemployed, be dislocated, be disgruntled, and we're just going to continue to have this cycle. So we need to build these earn and learn pathways where there's no economic, or there's less economic risk, there's less employment risk involved with it, and that lead to jobs that we know are out there. We know there are models for doing it, and I think that only once we have an actual critical mass of these seats in these, and frankly jobs that don't require degrees, colleges will then be forced to reform, not the UIA schools, but the rest, because the students aren't going to show up anymore and pay. I think that's what it's going to take.
You talk about, I would say, one, the earlier point about accountability. Here's the thing that people don't understand. It's not necessarily, yes, hold accountable, great. But do you know what they're not accountable for? Like, there's really very little things there hasn't been an accountability measure put in. That's the problem. I'm supposed to do long-term career outcomes. I'm also mental health. I'm also supposed to economic development. I'm also teaching and research. I'm also innovation and change. They have to do everything and be everything to everyone. And then you're like, well, but why my one thing over here, which we have not aligned resources around? We don't actually give you money for that. We don't pay for that.
Totally. As a country without much of a safety net, and you're familiar with this, Alex, in K-12 schools, we ask our K-12 schools to do 100 different things, and then we blame them for not achieving academic excellence. I agree with that.
Yeah, but your reflection on my point, I would just say, college is not a monolith, and it is a very individual choice, and we have to do a far better job actually helping people be successful with it. The institutions have to change and adapt, and we're not the only ones. There's a APLU institution, all the community colleges, there's vibrancy, there's so much impact and value being created. You are holding up, you do make broad sweeping generalizations that are primarily benefiting from a shady for-profit sector that has done irreparable damage to society at times, which is not all for-profit, by the way. There are plenty of good ones. Like, it's not a monolith.
Well, you'll be glad to know that we basically spend nothing on apprenticeship and earn and learn pathways in terms of public dollars.
I just don't think
today.
It has to be outside a classroom. I think that the idea that higher ed needs to improve, yes, and we should also involve apprenticeships. We should integrate things in the classroom. Our solution on college to career was literally the one place all students go is the classroom. That is where, no more career services, put it inside the classroom. Every single class should have a career readiness experience, a career readiness conversation. You should actually be equipped to go to a job interview and be able to talk about what you did in the classroom, and it could actually position you well. Like, we have to change a lot.
It's gonna get a lot worse before it gets better, because AI is changing entry-level jobs. They're no longer going to employers just aren't going to be hiring people because they have a degree and the potential to do the job. They're not going to want people doing menial work from day one.
You think it's just going to be skilled trades? I mean,
no, not skilled trades, but they're going to have essentially, because you're going to be expected to do higher value work from day one, because you're going to be using AI to do the menial work you used to do. You're going to have prior work experience in order to do that higher value work. And unless colleges and universities can figure out how to integrate real, relevant, paid work experience into their academic programs, so these are apprenticeships is an easy one, because you can graduate and then go into a job that doesn't demand the prior experience, because they're giving you the experience and skills in the apprenticeship. But I'm talking co-ops, internships, work integrated learning projects like the ones Ripen offers today.
In colleges.
That is critical. And tell me, can you convince me that in 5 years' time, every student at every college is going to have a meaningful work-based learning opportunity? I don't believe it.
Well,
They're not going to. They're
I
not
think
going to
far
do
more.
it.
I think right now the spice is here, right? Like if you ever needed something as an accelerant, I think that higher education has ignored the feedback of the public for a really long time and been apart from an elitist. There's been this like dissidence where we're just kind of like yeah. And we're also like we're totally uncomfortable with admitting we had a role to play when it comes to jobs. So that is the past. I think that the consequences came, right? And they're not great, and things are very difficult right now. But I think institutions, the accelerant is here, and I see change happening so much faster that I couldn't possibly update you on everything you described is happening at institutions across the country so much faster than they ever did, because you can't not.
So that is shocking to someone. I mean, Ryan, you made
honestly,
the point.
I don't believe it. I don't buy it. I think that those
Okay.
schools. I think the schools where that's happening are UIA schools, and they may be here, but they're the ones that are 90% who are not here. That's not happening. They're hunkered down. They've lost NIH funding. They're having a budget crisis. They're not spending money on work-based learning. No way.
Ryan, what if you had a magic wand? I want to crisp this up. What would the ratio of apprenticeships over the next few years?
Let me just clarify. I'm the apprenticeship guy, but let me clarify. There's a spectrum here where apprenticeships is on the right. It's the most involved. You have like a company actually hiring someone full time. But then work backwards on that spectrum. You have co-ops, right? A formal co-op program. Hard for us to understand. There are only like 10 universities in the country that actually do formal co-op. But it exists. It can exist. Then you have internships, which we know are in short supply. We know are unsystematic, informal, relationship-based, inequitable, the way they're currently structured. And we have this sort of emerging work-based learning platforms like Ripen and Parker Dewey and Extern. And so, it's a, depending on your program of study, right? You could have, sort of mix and match from that. But the reality is there is a dramatic shortage in each of those categories relative to the demand. When one of our companies launches an apprenticeship program, we have 300, 400 applicants for every seat in these apprenticeship programs. These are full-time jobs that pay $50,000 to $60,000. You don't not expected to have relevant skills, relevant experience. We give you that. We're just looking for cognitive skills, durable skills, and the ability to learn the job and the tech platform. So you can imagine why that's exciting to people. But it's just I wrote an article a year plus ago that I think summarizes the dilemma.
It was a TikTok.
The dilemma that high school graduates face in this country, and it was called college or Chipotle. And that's really where we are. We're basically saying it's college for all, and that we're still in the college for all era, even though I think that both parties have sort of come off of it. But in terms of an investment, like look where we're spending the money. It's all being spent on college today. And it's the alternative is like, yes, there are jobs available. There are frontline service jobs. You can work in retail. You can work in hospitality. Where are the career paths there? But out of high school, we have one model, and that's just not true in other countries. Like in Europe, for example, you can graduate from high school and become a pharmacy assistant. Right? You can go to work in a pharmacy, become an assistant, and then become a pharmacist. Yep. Without having to go to college, without earning a degree. We don't allow that in this country because of licensure and degree requirements associated with licensure. It is a higher education industrial complex that has co-opted the professions and licensure, and it's not working.
Bridget.
So you're okay with the doctor? You want a doctor that just did an apprenticeship too? I'm just kidding. That's obviously I'm voting. I would just say, so when it comes to apprenticeships, there's one person on the stage who's actually been directly affected by them. Both my parents actually pursued apprenticeships. My mom was a plumber. My dad was actually went to farrier school and was a horseshoer. And to put this all in context of why we should be thinking differently about college. So I think our issue here is that we think college is a one-shot deal. We think that you're either someone who goes or doesn't. You're someone who gets an apprentice or doesn't. And my dad was someone who he thought college wasn't for him, and so he was doing what millions of other Americans do, which is using their body to exchange their time for money. And then one day he went into work and a horse flipped over on him and paralyzed him. And all of a sudden, just like that, millions of other people learned this lesson in COVID too, which is that at some point, your body will break down. Yes, at 19, being a lineman, I would make so much more money, but not at 45. Okay, so at some point you want people to have the adaptability, the choice to be able to convert their lives and pivot to enter the knowledge economy. So thank God my dad was able to cash in his GI Bill and go get a bachelor's degree in computer science, right? You want things like that because it's not that I get an apprenticeship and I'm done for life. It's actually, how do we integrate these things? How do we make it so that education is broad, it's diverse, there's a lot of options, it's way more accountable. It definitely has done the work to make sure you get your value out of it, but it becomes a thing that you go to and from as you want to learn and grow.
But that's not college. That's not what we think of as college today. So I agree with you, right? Would I like a world where everyone graduates from high school and does an apprenticeship and has no further post-secondary education? Absolutely not, right?
Especially with AI, we don't actually know.
Totally, everyone, and nobody in their right mind would want that. But the reality is that, you know, what those apprentices are going to need is probably not 4 years of expensive college, right? They're going to probably need a 6 to 9 month program, and then maybe a 2-year program after that. That will be designed for specifically where they are in their career and how they move on and move up and become a manager and executive and so forth, like all of that. And they'll be delivering the same skills, the same capabilities that college ostensibly, purportedly delivers in terms of those critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills.
You're missing one skill though, social skills, right? I mean, for many of us, and I think this is relevant.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, are social skills better developed in college, or are they better developed actually in work?
Well, I think
also, let's just be honest, there is a race question that's missing here, which is we know that there are different outcomes, and you look at industries that you can see a vast majority is very white, and there are actual, like, there are structural issues. There are, it's actually, it's not something that, there is definitely going to be a disparity there. And so I think a broad swath, just, offering apprenticeships or skill-based learning is ignoring the very real issues in society where we have income inequality and we also have other components that make these kinds of things.
Yeah, and I will answer you. I mean, I think for myself and many of you who have sent children to college, college provides some liminal transitional state between being a child with your parents responsible for your day-to-day and being a full-blown adult.
That was great when it cost $8,000 a year, right? Phenomenal. It worked well, and there are lots of schools where public schools in state, maybe some of your institutions where like that actually is the tuition or it's close to that, and then you have room and board and so forth, and it's challenging. But the reality is that for the vast majority, it is not free. They are taking on debt, and there needs to be a return on that investment. And I don't blame colleges and universities. I think that they're doing as good a job as they've ever done at equipping young people with cognitive skills, durable skills, and so forth. The problem, it's not college's fault. The economy has moved away. As I say in my last book, college has been closed for the most part. The economy is very open and is moving rapidly, and digital transformation has changed the economy, changed jobs, specifically changed the entry-level jobs that college grads used to get. And colleges have not kept up. And so now we not only have an affordability crisis, which everyone knows, we have an employability crisis that AI is going to turn into a huge problem. And unless colleges change dramatically, so college is not worth it today, on average, for if you take like if you didn't know what your status was in life, right? The John Rawls' original position, right? You're behind a veil of ignorance, and you had to say.
Did you learn that during an apprenticeship, John Rawls?
Was it that
your
coding?
Rawlsian reference was during
Look, I don't apologize for, and I do believe. Look, if you can afford to send, and most people in this room probably can afford to send their kids to college and spend whatever, like that's great. Like do it, because. Great that your kid does not have to choose like what they want to do, what they want. Like skills-based training apprenticeships are linear, and they may limit your future choices. But that still, for many people, is a better option than what we have today.
Well, I mean, we could go into like skill durability and how the life of a skill. We know that is not nearly the one-size-fits-all solution that you might imply. I do think that we are in violent agreement that we need a lot of options. We need to be better connected to the workforce. I can't tell you the number of times that a college or university has launched a program in direct response because a partnership with an employer, they're like, we want to actually support this, and then all of a sudden, psych, we're going to move out of town.
Right.
And so they build a program. They invest thousands, if not millions of dollars in a whole entire offering, and then they pull the rug out from under them. So we cannot treat college as this one-time thing. It is not apart from society. It is absolutely the best of who we are if we actually make it deliver on what it needs to.
I agree with that.
The other is, like, I mean, honestly, on the cost thing, yes, it has gone up, but I mean, the vast majority of the institutions ignore the Ivy League because they're kind of irrelevant in this conversation. Our institutions actually most institutions are fighting on this issue. They are trying to lower costs. Purdue hasn't raised their tuition in 10 years.
Yeah,
like,
they have
There
been.
are actual, like, real significant wins out there, and the problem is that we have to ask ourselves, who benefits from college? And it's all of us. And are we all actually, like, when it comes to how we fund universities, it's been a piecemeal chipping away at their stability, and over time what you see is defensive way, like clinging to try and still provide value, and I don't think it's been as effective as you think, and it could improve, but this is not something they did to us.
Let's talk about the bifurcation between, I mean, you often reference the top 20 schools that provide a unique value, and then...
And where a lot of the research is done, by the way, to your initial point about the...
So, you know, I'm going to go with Jefferson here. So he said, a long time ago, that, you know, it was essential for people to spend some amount of time cultivating the capacity, this is the quote, to judge for themselves what will secure or endanger their freedom, unencumbered from familial authority and the burdens of and toil of work. So college, to me 20 years ago, again, it was not about economic ROI. That was important. I was very privileged and lucky, but it was about developing values and ethics and thinking about how to be a citizen. Is that something we should leave to the top 20 school, like the top 20 schools or the elite class?
Huge problem. But you know, I've written about how, like, this is a triage situation, right? The patient is bleeding out on the table, and we need to, like, focus on the stuff that is, like, why are we politically and economically and socially where we are today? It's because half the country feels like there's no opportunity for them. We have not been delivering on. They see this promise of, you know, America and the digital economy and so forth, but they're not able to participate in it. Because we haven't created the pathways to it, because, you know, up until very recently, the Democratic Party, their view has been college for all, college is the answer, everything. And the reality is that most of those people come from privileged backgrounds and didn't have to worry about the cost, and were able to focus on these issues, which are important. But the patient is bleeding out on the table. We need to stop the bleeding.
Who is the patient?
The patient is the student, the young person who is, you know, going to have a negative economic outcome from enrolling in college.
Oh no, I think they're going to have a negative economic outcome if they do not enroll in college. The college has to adapt and shift and do a better job supporting them, onboarding them,
that's
actually
true,
hold
right.
themselves accountable on student success.
College needs to change, but the question is, what is it today? Is college worth it today? It's not.
It is
Will
worth it
college
today.
be worth it in the future? That's
Unequivocally.
not the debate.
All the data that you often cite in your newsletter, like, you're always looking at, you know, I'd love to be able to compete with a boot camp and only have 5 years of data to be held accountable for. Instead, what I'm actually defending is older than the church. Okay, like the data, it outpaces everything else. It is where all the foundations upon which the great, like, solutions in society have come, and so, you know, you're only looking at a narrow band of time, which is a time in which the economy and industry has rapidly changed. We didn't catch up fast enough. We got the message, we got the memo. We're coming in a little late. We're coming in hot. And clearly, we need to do it much more equally distributed. We need to take on
I
a
want
fundamental
all that to
responsibility
happen.
here.
I want that's going to be
It's
great.
happening. Welcome.
Let's come back here next year and see how many of your schools are actually doing systematic work-based learning across the student body for students in arts and humanities
Just one example
programs.
is at ASU, they've created something called Work Plus, which is just the recognition that we can sit here and complain about employers not treating our students well or not actually mentoring them and teaching them, or we can recognize that actually we're the biggest employer of our own students. And so let's fundamentally transform that experience. You have all kinds of solutions that are
I've written about University of Iowa's journalism school buying community newspapers and using them as like work experiences for journalism students. Like, we need much more of that, but the problem is that you're citing these as examples schools, and they're anomalies. That's the problem. They're anomalies because there are thousands of schools where this is not happening.
Well, honestly, part of the problem is there's so much progress and innovation happening, whether it's about analytics and chatbots and data and advising, and there is so much structural change happening at institutions. It's difficult to keep up.
And much of that is focused on completion, which is a good thing, but what are we completing them into, right? It's not addressing any of the employment economic outcomes that I'm talking about.
Yeah, so I think this is a really nice point for us to end on, which is there's been a lot of talk about measuring ROI and mobility, and we know that mobility is like this North Star. So my institutions decided that they were going to take that on and not just try and measure it, which is what we think is considered naturally the baseline, but actually improve it. And what I've done now is try to be like, okay, I assume there's a bunch of measures I could use. No, there's a bunch of conversation about it. There have been little tiny tests and such, but we actually need to come to agreement about how it is colleges should measure. Is it the employment at first job? Because if you think about it, like when you think about your first job and when you really felt like college was worth it, what was that moment like and how would I measure that? And I think there's a broad answer there.
We gotta move to our final exercise. Ryan, if you have something in 20 seconds to say. Okay. Every podcast we do at the Disagreement, we end with something we call the Steel Man. Have you guys heard of steel manning? Anyone out here heard of it? Okay, so it is the opposite of a straw man, okay? It's when you take your disagreement partner's arguments and you put them in the strongest possible, you articulate them in the strongest possible way to show that you've been listening and, okay? So this is gonna be good, it's a test. And that you perhaps have some empathy for them, empathy not required. Now, here's what we're gonna do. You're each gonna get a chance, and then your disagreement partner will judge you and give you a grade on how well you did articulating their position. Who wants to go first? You gotta say it in the first person and really commit to it. Who wants to go first?
Bridget, you've done an amazing job.
No. That's true. You have to say, I believe the college is worth it. In the first person, articulate her position. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
This is hard for me to do. I believe that college is more than just the economic outcomes for individual students on a relatively short-term measure. I believe that college has benefits for society, for research and innovation, for citizenship, and that the millions of well-meaning people who are currently engaged in the higher education enterprise are working extremely hard to catch up with economic change and digital transformation and do better in terms of employment outcomes, so we can do even better on those short-term economic outcomes for young people.
So to all these people out here considering college, you got to finish it off, please.
Please think carefully.
So close. So close.
That was so uncomfortable. You seemed so deeply uncomfortable. I wanted to hold your hand and be like, are you okay?
Wait, give him a grade. You got to give him a grade. A through.
I give you an A for effort.
For effort? No. This is not the Ivy League. This is not the Ivy League. You got to give a real grade.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't give you you wouldn't get a skill-based hire for it. But, B plus.
B plus. All right. B plus. All right, Bridget. Here we go.
Higher education is dramatically underperformed and has caused real harm in society and needs to evolve. And I think that there are alternative models that I'm not trying to throw everything away, but that you absolutely need to take them seriously. They're going to be an expansive solution that we need to invest in. Instead of this one-size-fits-all approach, we need to recognize the complexity of the future is going to demand a multitude of different approaches. And that is why Achieve Partners is here to invest.
All right, great. You got to get that. That was good. That was good.
I'm gonna have to pay you for that now. That was better than mine, I think.
So
A minus.
what? A minus?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was a state champion in debate.
Yeah, that was good. All right. So before we do the final clap, please make sure, if you enjoyed this, to subscribe to The Disagreement. You can go to thedisagreement.com on your phone, subscribe. We do education, but we also do all topics, politics, culture, you name it. And with that, let's give a huge round of applause to our two debaters for the day. We'll see you here next year with a year's worth of data from Bridget. We'll try to do this again in a year. Okay. Thank you.
Please take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Please take a moment to silence your electronic devices. The program will begin shortly. Please take your seats. The program is about to begin.
Welcome, everybody. How are you doing? I know you're having lunch. Please continue ever so quietly. I'm super excited for you to be coming together for us to have a conversation with a series of leaders who I think are going to give us perspective. We brought folks across politics, across education, technology, and mental health. And this is going to be a vibrant engagement of a series of panels that I can't wait for you to get a chance. It obviously sounds like it's going to be pretty awesome based on what's happening in the prep room, right? So this first conversation is going to be moderated by Ben Wallerstein, who's the co-founder of Whiteboard Advisors. But it's going to feature a broad cross-section of folks who are just really impressive. And the title of the panel is actually Forming a More Perfect Union, focusing on bipartisanship. What can we do together? How can we cross the divide? And now, in order to do that, we're going to have a variety of folks who I think you're really going to want to listen to. So the first is, it's going to feature Jane Swift, who's the former governor of Massachusetts and is also the leader of Work. Yes, no, you're going to be in the middle. Okay, so I will roll you out later, but you're the president of Education at Work. We also have Katie Jenner, who is the Secretary of Education for Indiana. Come on out, and you can sit wherever. Jack Markell, who's the former governor of Delaware, the former U.S. ambassador to Italy. We have Amy Guidera, the Secretary of Education of Virginia. I'm so sorry. Yes. And Kirsten Sinema, who's a former senator from Arizona. And so I want to make sure that we get a chance to hear now from them about a more perfect union and what we can do from bipartisan lens. So please join me in welcoming Ben Wallerstein.
It's on. Thank you, Bridget. That was lovely. And thanks everyone for being here. Always incredibly grateful to Michael and to Deborah, especially right now for convening folks who bring different ideologies and perspectives to bear on the important work that we're doing in the education context. Governor Swift. Out of the gate, I just want to start with you. I'm not going to do intros because Bridget already did, but Governor, what's an issue that people? I'm going to ask each of you this, but Jane will have the least preparation. What's the education policy issue that people are paying the most attention to that they maybe shouldn't be, and what are they missing that they should be paying more attention to?
Thank you. I may be prepared for that. For those of you who have seen me at GSV before, I just need to tell you one thing. I gave up drinking and swearing for Lent, so if you're expecting a show, it's going to be a little more subdued this year, so just so you know.
But you are wearing a hoodie.
I am wearing a hoodie. This is an Ann Wicks design. So in all seriousness, we're in very interesting times, and I think the biggest challenge for policy leaders, for state leaders who are still, Amy and Katie, who are still out there in the trenches serving students. The biggest challenge is to stay focused, and Katie said this earlier, on the main thing. And I think in higher education, in particular the area I'm in, higher education with the transition to workforce, the challenge is not to be distracted by the shiny thing. And so you would think, if you watch TV every day, that every college student in America is mostly obsessed with protesting, that every institution in America is filled with elite college students. I always make the joke, marching around in their Lululemon pants and their Canada Goose jackets, outraged about something. In fact, what we all should be focused on is, and listen, in the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth that I come from, our colleges and universities are incredibly important to our economy. And if this was a biotech investment conference or a healthcare conference, a focus on our elite colleges and universities and the cuts that are happening at MIT and Harvard would have a much bigger impact because they're impacting those economic sectors. What we need to focus on, I believe, in higher education are all the large institutions in our states who are educating the workforce of the future and the huge number of students. So 50%, Georgetown Center for the workforce. I don't know the exact title, but they don't pay me, so I don't have to. But Georgetown has done some great research. 50% of young adults in America today make less than $35,000 a year. So we can joke all we want about this generation not moving out of their parents' basement, but if you're making $35,000 a year, it's incredibly difficult to live independently in most of our major cities or even our rural or suburban areas to support yourself on that kind of a wage. Many of our college graduates, not because of what's happening necessarily in their college or university, are underemployed because many employers are requiring students to have a year or two of experience and specific credentials. We need to totally re-envision how students are getting work experience and credentials in addition to, not instead of, in addition to a high-value college degree, which many of them are getting, and get them into the workforce with skills and credentials so that there is social and economic mobility for the broad working and middle-class students at the University of Texas El Paso, at Arizona State University, at the University of Utah, at Maricopa Community College, all the places we're doing business, and take our eyes off of what's happening at elite universities and colleges and focus how we continue to provide upward social and economic mobility for the vast number of students whose parents, caregivers, and they themselves are angry about the fact that the American experiment is not working for them.
Really grateful for that response. And Senator Sinema, maybe take the same question. I've always admired your approach. You've helped to elevate and focus our public consciousness in all sorts of different ways on areas of bipartisan alignment, focus our attention on issues that maybe wouldn't have otherwise been as mainstream as they were as a result of your work. But what are we missing?
So I'm going to give both a micro and a macro answer. I've been teaching at Arizona State University, Go Sun Devils, for 22 years. And that's what I'm talking about, ASU. And what I've seen, I teach both undergrad and graduate students, and what I've seen is a change in the students' preparedness and ability to enter the workforce. So at the micro level, I think that what we're missing and what we need more focus on is teaching students critical thinking skills and the ability to manage situations for which there is no right or wrong answer. So the idea is less about teaching them specific sets of knowledge or chunks of knowledge, and more, because I think we're good at that in our country. But what we're not doing a good enough job is teaching students how to think in situations for which there is not a chunk of knowledge to provide an answer, right? So how do we teach students to think critically in an environment that's rapidly changing and in which the typical answers of A, B, or C aren't going to apply? So that's at the micro level. At the macro level, I would say that universities writ large, both public, private, elite, non-elite, great ones like ASU, that we should be thinking about how to design programs and curriculum that helps students have marketable skills connected to the job market right when they leave. Yeah. So building off what Jane said, look, it's hard out there. They're underemployed. They've got to have a couple years experience before they can get a job. But also, we're not always everywhere doing a great job of making sure that what a student graduates with actually matches with what an employer needs. Now, that's something that we've got to do a much better job at. So that instead of facing situations of unemployment and I need 2 years of work experience, we want students coming out of the gate where an Intel or an ASML or a startup says, an OpenAI says, you've got the skills that I want right now. And there are lots of things that we can do, partnering with corporations through the pipeline in years 3 and 4 in particular of a university program, adjusting curriculum to match the needs of employers, thinking about the jobs of tomorrow rather than the jobs of today and yesterday. Those are the macro things I think that we need to do a better job at.
And they're all bipartisan issues.
Yeah, and none
of this is partisan unless you're insane.
Right. We're going to get to that, but
even if you're insane, I think it's bipartisan.
We're my co-moderator, Governor Swift, just pointed it at Superintendent Jenner. So because there's this sort of a softball type. Yeah, but the you are doing that. So I want to continue to pull that thread on what people are fixating on that maybe they shouldn't, and what they're maybe what they're missing. So we'll continue with that theme. But you are doing this work, right? You're focusing on critical skills. So I wanna in the context of that question, ask a little bit about where you're getting, where you might be getting pushback, right? Because I think there's a tendency to hear about these new skills, durable skills. We used to call them 21st century skills not long ago, right? And maybe there are pockets in states like where I live in Alabama that maybe think those are squishy, or those are sort of like newfangled skills, and maybe we're eroding rigor. But in the context of that shift, what are people missing, and what should they be paying more attention to?
Yeah, so I heard a couple questions, and I'm watching the time, because on the pushback, we don't have enough time for all of us to sit here and tell how much pushback we've had in trying to drive good change for people.
It turns out really commonsensical things do sometimes trigger some.
Well, I think the reality is some of our strongest leaders, pushback is what helps establish the common ground that is necessary to drive work the fastest. And I'll give you a prime example. I think there are K-12 folks, a lot of Indiana folks in here, by the way. We come in strong. And I know that there are higher ed as well. I mean, we just overhauled our high school diploma. We said we've got to be more flexible, personalized for children in Indiana so that they can find their purpose and know their value and possibilities. But that level of driving change was really hard. And look no further than Googling my name and universities that are fantastic in Indiana, like Purdue University, and headlines that hit us this summer when we were driving this change. We released the first set of diploma draft in March. We had enormous pushback driving this change during a gubernatorial election year, which lesson learned. But that pushback allowed us to get where we are today. And so where Purdue, and Meng Chang, President Chang is a good buddy of mine. I'll probably text him right after and be like, I called you out, so be aware. Somebody tweets you. But that pushback led us to the second draft, which was released in August. And then you all, last week, we had a major announcement in Indiana that I hope challenges other states. With our new diploma structure, any student in Indiana who gets a certain outcome, which is a seal in the enrollment space, will be auto-admitted to any of our public colleges in Indiana, period. So you talk about a recipe for success and letting parents and students know what that recipe is. Purdue University was the first to sign up, and that all started with pushback and getting to common ground. It got us to a much better place.
I really appreciate that, and I hope folks are encouraged by the work that you're doing and the work that Secretary Goodere is doing in Virginia. I think people often forget that many of the innovations that formed the basis for federal policy grew out of the laboratories for innovation that are state governments. And we've got a governor turned twice ambassador here who's done some of the most pioneering work in early adoption of technology and other things at the state level. But so we're going to come to that in just a minute. I'd love to hear about your time in France and Italy. But you all are moving the needle in Virginia in really significant ways, in ways that I think folks don't appreciate or hear about when they encounter this notion of shifting power back to states. So tell us what you're doing at the state level that folks should be so excited about.
Great. So I'll start with your original question, if I can do that one too.
Sure, no problem.
So I feel like we're living in Virginia and across this nation that politics is the greatest distraction, and you mentioned that. And what we're missing is a sense of urgency that we're in crisis with our education across this country. And what we just experienced with the NAEP data in Virginia and every place else is that we just erased 20 years of incredible progress, and that we have erased it. And we were telling some good stories that were lifting most boats, and that's gone. And I'm dismayed by the fact that that's not a front page news article on every paper in every town. And instead, we're getting distracted by a whole lot of things and a whole lot of political reasons for doing that, which I don't want to dwell on today. And so part of what Governor Youngkin needed to do when he came in was to create that sense of urgency and to be honest with the people of the Commonwealth. Because he came in saying he was going to restore excellence to education. And people said, how dare you? This is Virginia. We are awesome. And that was what we needed to do, was to help people realize that averages mask a lot of realities. And just to give you some of this data, is one, we had the largest learning loss in NAEP in 4th grade, which is horrific in Virginia. But also, as was mentioned earlier, this continues throughout our entire education system. And I'll give you a statistic that's a year old. I need to get it updated. And this is probably true in every one of your schools as well, your higher ed. 10% of Virginia first-year students in our 15 four-year schools do not persist onto a second year. And of those 10%, 40% have a debt load of $10,000 when they leave with no degree or no credential. And what we're hearing from our college presidents, is what was also alluded to, is that our students are not graduating ready to do college level work. We're hearing that from our employers, right? We are in crisis. That the signals keep telling us we're not producing the people who are ready, which is why the work that Katie's leading in Indiana is so important, to have these credentials, to have the seals, to have the signals about readiness. And so what we're really excited about what we're doing in Virginia is, one, having an incredible focus on, one, raising expectations and being really clear about what standards of excellence look like at every level. That's in early childhood, with having quality indicators that every parent can access, and now through our portal and use a digital wallet to choose the best high-quality child care provision. It's in our K-12 system, where we also just redid not only all of our core standards, but also have created and replaced a very faulty accreditation system that, even with that horrific loss in learning loss on NAEP, we were telling parents and citizens that 100% of the schools were accredited. And the message we were giving is, everything's groovy here, nothing to worry about, when the truth was very different. And so we're about honesty telling and transparency and creating a sense of urgency to say we cannot lose another generation of kids, which we're about to. So in our new accountability system, which we very purposely are calling a school performance and support framework, because we're not going to just tell students, and we're going to name schools as being, in need of intensive support, off track, on track, and distinguish, because that's how moms and dads talk. When you go in and say, how's my kid doing? Is she on track or not? So we're trying to use language, but it's not to shame and blame schools. It's so we can identify schools and then make sure that we prioritize the resources of time, energy, and money to the schools, the students, and the communities who need it the most, so that we can, and also use data-driven, proven approaches to make sure that we follow what the data tells us and make advances. And then we're continuing that on through, and the connection with the higher ed, which again is the theme that we're hearing, is that in this accountability system, there's a focus on readiness for life at every level, so that schools will get extra credit and points in their accountability system if they are preparing students that earn an industry-recognized credential, if they are earning college credit, an associate's degree, or they are ready with their military ready. And why that matters is, it's not just access to it, what I call the perfume test, where you've been exposed to CTE or you've gone to a college level class, but it's actually mastery and competency, and that you have a proof, again, a signal, like in Indiana, to say, I am ready. And then we're working with our higher education institutions to say, how do we make sure that those pathways are clear, people understand the financial aid pieces of it, so that everyone understands that there's not a one-size-fits-all way of doing this, but that it's that there are multiple pathways to success in Virginia. I could talk more about what we're doing in higher ed, but I've taken up too much breath. But it's about transparency, honesty with ourselves, raising expectations, and then having the system have incentives to change.
Yeah, and I hope folks let that just marinate a little bit. Like, that's a lot to process. That's like a complex system of accountability paired with incentives that are predicated on decades of research and policy experimentation. You're revamping your high school graduation requirements in ways that sort of align with the sorts of skills that are needed for economic mobility, and to address historic inequities in who achieves economic mobility. And this is happening not as a result of federal prescription. It's not happening in a vacuum either, but it's happening at the state level, spearheaded by politicians who are facing political blowback and risk.
I am not a politician.
Sure, but spearheaded.
I really
right?
am appointed. I'm not. I don't run for.
You are appointed, but it's not. You were. But I think that, again, it's important, I think, to let that kind of marinate a little bit, that this is what's happening around the country. It's not a reversion to historic norms. It's about pushing the envelope in terms of systemic improvement and improved outcomes. So, I've asked a few questions. I've popped around. I haven't asked necessarily the question that I said I was going to ask to start. There's kind of two on the floor now, but Governor, Ambassador.
Well, thank you, Ben, and great to be with all of you. And I thought what all of my colleagues had to say was incredibly interesting and important. And particularly, I've been so interested since I was governor, which is a while ago now, it was 2009 and 2017, the idea of connection from school to the workforce. If we had been having this conversation 2 months ago, I think my response now would be different. And I hate to be sort of the skunk at the picnic. But my jaw is on the floor, having gone very deep over the last couple months into AI, which of course is like the topic of half of these sessions here. I don't know what it is that we're making sure our kids, what are we getting them ready for? What does career readiness mean? And I honestly don't know. And on the one hand, I think these technologies are extraordinary and are going to save some of our biggest problems. And at the same time, they obviously represent all kinds of threats in some bad ways. But for the purposes of this conversation, literally, what are we preparing our students for? What kind of work? One of the things when I was governor that I was particularly proud of was the work we did around career pathways. We have much better information today than we have ever had before about the labor market. Where the jobs are, what kinds of skills these jobs require, where people can get these skills. I don't know if that's going to be relevant in 5 years. And I'm not picking a date of like 20 years away, because it's now. And I commend, particularly the educators who are here, because this is going to be, it's going to be on you in sort of, a very person-to-person way. But when we talk, and I appreciated what the Secretary from Virginia talked about, the need to be honest, and I think this is really important, starting with the political officials that Ben mentioned, to be honest with our constituents. What is this going to look like? And I cannot for the life of me, I read a few weeks ago that applications to law school are way up. And, with apologies to any lawyers who may be in the room, I don't know why. Because when you see what these new models are capable of today, it's really unclear to me what a lot of the lawyers are going to do. And I think you could repeat this, field after field after field. So I think everything that you all said is right, and yet at the same time, like the specifics of what it is that our kids can now aspire to, we don't know. And so I will leave to that. I can see Senator Sinema wants to get in on this.
Yeah, so as you were talking, Jack, I was like, yes, that's right. Which is why I think it's so important that we teach students skills about thinking and reasoning and being nimble and agile and the ability to change and grow. Because then you're not teaching them to go like work at the factory and get the watch when they retire. You're thinking them to provide value that nothing else can replace. Right? It's about the way that they think and reason and behave. And that is about enduring skill sets, not so much preparing for job A, B, C, or D.
Which is why, so when I was governor, which is not so long ago, but it's, I finished in 2017, I was all over the credentials movement, and I think the credentials movement's incredibly important. But to your point, the critical thinking skills and the ability to be really, really nimble as you think about your career and what you're learning is also really important.
And I would just say one of the things, and this is self-serving, but what we do at Education at Work is, and deeply believe that students in college, but also students in high school, they need to be learning those skills well embedded in work. And, 15, 20 years ago, no high school students were taking college level courses. Now it is like pretty much ubiquitous. We need to make what the senator talked about, which is college students who are learning skills, learning practical applications, because I'm not a defender of the status quo in higher education by any stretch of the imagination, but to expect that when even folks who are in the private sector don't know what their industry is going to look like in 5 years, to expect the people whose job is to teach college students, you know, very specific tasks and skills, should know what the private sector is going to look like in a different industry in 5 years is unfair. But we can embed students. We can give them both the critical thinking skills, and I do still think it's important to know how to read and write and to read the classics, and everybody should read The Longest Walk about what happened in World War II and know those things and know our history. But then you can get those critical, durable, social, human, whatever we want to call them, and become a lifelong learner, but learn them in practical application so that you are flexible and versatile and making, most importantly, the networks and connections so that you're going to be figuring it out. Because I don't know either, but I know that kids who come from Pell Grant families in our first generation need to have the same advantages to do it as my kids so that they have the same opportunities that kids who come from privilege, whose parents, when they figure it out, are going to tell them the answer.
Yep. That was great. You ready to run for office again? I do have a law degree.
Unelectable.
I have a law degree. There's a bunch of degrees up here. Like, what I don't do is I don't take my law degree down to City Hall and, like, cash it in and get money, right? Like, and my wife doesn't take her bachelor's degree and cash that in and get money. It turns out, like, you go to school, you engage in learning experiences, you acquire credentials, but then you have to figure out how to translate the skills that you acquire through the acquisition of those credentials into something of value.
Right.
I would be very hesitant to spend $150,000, $200,000, $250,000, $300,000 to get that credential when I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
100%. And by the way, I think what you're wrestling with, and as you've gone through those multiple drafts of the new high school graduation requirements, the work you're doing with Tim Knowles and the folks at Carnegie, that's like a new endeavor. There's sort of like a heuristic shift, right? Like, so, we used to think that we could sort of instrument our way into better educational outcomes with the goal of improving economic mobility. And then we kind of went through this moment where we were sort of like fixated on college access and completion. Not that those aren't worthy ambitions, but that doesn't solve everything. Right. And now we're focused on this sort of like, we're kind of at the dawn of this new era where we're focused on the intersection of learning and economic mobility. How do we help people to develop skills and competencies that they're able to translate? People used to ask Jake Schwartz, who was the founder of General Assembly, who some of you might know, and they'd say, like, well, I don't get it. Like, when people go to a General Assembly coding boot camp, what do they get? Like, do they get a bachelor's degree? Do they get a certificate? And Jake used to say, no, they get a job, right? Like, and so I think we're losing confidence in the value of credentials unless those credentials are correlated. Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
So just to build on that, so one of the things that we have tried to transform in Virginia in the last several years is using labor market information to make every single decision in our education and workforce systems so that we can try to get, and Governor, it doesn't go to your point of this all may blow up and we may not know in 20 years, but what we've done is that if you want to look at its VOE, Virginia Office of Education Economics, it's basically labor market information that is now available in a timely, actionable way. And what we have done is made that basically be the North Star for everything that we do. So that in 8th grade, we now, as part of our accountability system, every 8th grader needs to do an academic and career plan, which they've had to do for a while, but it was a compliance exercise that nobody ever actually did. Now, every single guidance counselor in the state is being retrained to look at the VOE data, to work with their students, look at the VOE data, understand what are the in-demand jobs right now, what do they pay in the region, in the state, and then what are the multiple pathways to get there, and to understand how do you stack credentials, how is it that you could actually earn an associate's degree or get a series of credentials that allow you to get a job or to go back. And what it's doing is blowing up the one-size-fits-all system, but it's also changing the culture that everybody needs to go to college, right, which has failed. That's my whole point. Why we have 10% of our students dropping out after a year of college is they probably weren't ready for college or it wasn't the right thing for them, and yet we keep telling everyone, go. And so by giving people, it's not a gift, by providing people the information that they need and including policymakers and institutions to have that information too. And this is why the second piece we're doing with this outcomes portal at our SHEV, at our coordinating board, if you go look at the outcomes portal at SHEV, you now can see the outcomes for every single higher education institution, including the labor market rates as it compares to the median wages for all the programs of study in Virginia. So what that does for that 8th grader who's going to look at both of those websites in a seamless way is to look and say, what are the most in-demand jobs now and projected for the next 10 years? What are all the pathways I can go? And where are the institutions, and how do I earn the credentials and degrees in the most cost-effective, time-effective way, and how do I do it? That is blowing up the system and putting the information into the hands of the opportunity seeker, whether that opportunity seeker is 16, 12, or 66. And that's what we're trying to do to transform, is empowering people with information that's been sitting in data warehouses, not connected, not done. This is why this conference is so important, is it's full of problem solvers thinking about how do we break down silos, how do we get data to turn into information, and to use it to make decisions for the most important people in this, which are the people who are trying to seek better opportunity.
So Ben, just to pull a thread here, I just looked down at my notes and I was like, is this the Rethinking High School panel that I'm on? Yeah. Or is this the bipartisan? But herein lies our common ground. We have Republicans, Democrats, Independents on this stage, and we have only talked about one topic that we all could one up and add in for probably hours. And so I think our opportunity as a country in a polarized, I'm going to take us back. This is the teacher in me. I'm going to get us back to the polarizing situation that some of us are navigating. Yesterday, there was a discussion about how, in many cases, some folks are paralyzed in the moment. But I just want to call out, some people are also empowered in the moment. With tough times, with uncontrollables, you can also, there's such opportunity to seize. You mentioned urgency earlier. And again, the common ground that is quickly, and a couple of us know each other, most of us don't, but that common ground that was quickly established was pretty cool to see. But we are on the bipartisan panel, not the Rethinking High School panel.
And the one thing I would say is, well, it's important to start that in 8th grade and to give students that information. My biggest argument, and this is still bipartisan, but it may be a little bit controversial. My biggest frustration right now with a lot of policy is we're driving those information down into a younger ages and then assuming we don't have to keep giving that information. And to Governor Markle, Ambassador point, things are changing so quickly. So A, we should be providing that information closer to the student, right? Either at the institution level, within a job with mentors, or at the state level, providing it through portals. But we can't stop giving students that information and assuming that if the best pathway is, because I still think nurses are going to need some formal training at a post-secondary institution. And I think we all believe that teachers are going to need some post-secondary institution training. How we train them, what we train them in may continue to evolve, but we need to continue to give them that good data so that they can pursue their purpose, they can find their passion, but they also know what those pathways are, how they're changing, what the data says, and we put a ton of effort and money and policy and philanthropic dollars into pathways in 8th grade through high school. We have abandoned, in many cases, these students once we get them to college, and the data tells us they are in terrible trouble. And the last plea I will make is, the kids who are in college right now where there is massive disruption because of some of the political chaos are the very kids that we locked in their room in their first couple of years in college during COVID or their senior year in high school. They are young adults who have massive issues, and we have disrupted them. They were born in the aftermath of 9/11. They're all the same ages as my children. We are going to lose a generation of students who have been through so much trauma, so much disruption, unless all of us commit to not just rethinking high school, but thinking through what young adults in our country have been through, and we need to give them hope, we need to give them purpose, we have to give them a belief in not just our democracy, but in their own future to both make a difference and have success in this country, because we are losing them.
And data. But so,
data.
Senator Sinema, and then I want to go to Jack.
So, I wanted, Katie was talking about, you know, that some folks are feeling paralyzed and others are like, this is really exciting what's happening, and others are like, oh my God, the world is ending. And I would suggest that that perhaps a way to consider thinking about the movement forward in terms of education is to be willing for people of both political parties to just kind of let go of the old stories and narratives that drove your behavior around education. So the stories of it's not the money, it's the value of the education, or the story of the unions are great or the unions are horrible, all the stories that we all know and have known for all of these years. I would suggest that perhaps those aren't as important right now, and that the things that we should be thinking about are different than the old stories of right versus left in the large debate around education. Because what we're actually facing, as Jack mentioned, is a great unknown. And with that great unknown comes incredible potential, incredible opportunity, but also challenges that we can't even define yet, right? Because the unknown is so much bigger, so much greater than anything we've ever experienced. And so I would just humbly suggest that the crap that we used to argue about is just not as important right now. And that the challenge that we face, again, is not a partisan challenge. It's an existential challenge for us as a country and as a globe, right? We've got this rapidly changing world, and so much of what we're talking about at this conference is about the development of AI, the power, but also the challenges. And if we allow ourselves to get stuck in the small arguments of the past that were the political partisan arguments that are still kind of driving the narrative at the national level around education right now, that we're going to miss the boat. And so this is a great time for us to just kind of put down those weapons from the past, which they're dull. They're not even very effective anymore on either side. And instead think, what's the big challenge in front of us and how can we approach it together?
So I totally agree with that, and I'd also say with this uncertainty, I have never been more excited about the opportunities available. I sort of wish I was a bunch younger so that I could really be participating at that level. And I think to your point that, you know, this is not the meeting on the convening on rethinking high school. I think the fact that that is what we're talking about, and I'm guessing most of you really can't tell who is the Democrat and who's the Republican, and you shouldn't. Because this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. I mean, this is something that every one of us should be pretty aligned on. Yep. The other thing I wanted to say, and I really appreciated what Amy had to say, I think what you're doing in Virginia in terms of using that labor market information to help kids make the choices about the future is fantastic because, as I said earlier, we have better labor market information now than we've ever had before. The part that we need to focus on is who is going to help these kids understand what it means. And you mentioned specifically guidance counselors. In my state, that would have been very difficult because we have way too few of them. And I think one of the things that we've got to do is really invest in more guidance counselors and good guidance counselors who can help. And the other thing we have to do, and I think about the educators who are in the room, you know, one of the big crises that we're not talking about is recruiting new teachers. And I understand why that is a crisis, but to those of you who are in the classroom, I mean, how can we say thank you enough? Because you are dealing with all of the political craziness and being attacked for, you know, things that have absolutely nothing to do with what you're doing in the classroom. But you're also helping these young people through this period of uncertainty. And so I think really focusing in both on the recruitment of more guidance counselors and on the teacher retention and recruitment crisis is going to be critical because it's very easy to say these technologies are extraordinary, which they are, but they alone will not solve the problem. These young people need adults in the room who are going to help them figure it all out. And also, frankly, how to assess them because that's going to be really important when it will look easy, at least on paper, that you understand something. How do you really drill into that?
Those are incredibly powerful statements coming from two leaders that I really admire. Education is so often a proxy political issue. Yes. It's an issue that is encumbered by factions that care an awful lot about systems and institutions, as opposed to in certain cases, I think in many cases, the beneficiaries, the intended beneficiaries of those systems, and the aspirations and the purpose that those systems and institutions were set up for in the first place. Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell who's the Democrat and who's the Republican up here. And I think that when you drill down into the education policy context, it's often pretty hard. I don't ever, or certainly very rarely, question intent. I might disagree on a matter of public policy, but heck, I've been at this 25 years, and I've worked with many of you when some of you are still in office, and I've worked with some of you when you were in office and out of office. And I think what's so often, what I'm struck by so often, given the work that we do at Whiteboard Advisors, is just how much commonality of interest there is. I was thinking about asking the question, what's the bright spot? Where is their bipartisan alignment? And as you all were talking, I was thinking to myself, the better question is, like, where's the divergence? So we've got 40 seconds. I don't know if we can, if we can get through that.
Well, I think the divergence is made up.
Yeah.
So look, there are absolutely substantive policy differences, but those are just different avenues to get to the same end result. I think the differences are mostly made up because, as you said, it's political proxy. They're made up so that there is a fight and so that you can use the fight politically. And so just don't take the bait. That's my advice. Just
don't take the bait. We've got 10, 9. I'm going to finish this thing on time, and I'm sure everyone's got, but please join me in applauding this group. So very grateful.
Welcome back. That was a masterclass in how you can actually find common ground. And just like they said in the panel, that was almost a strong, they were united around a clear sense of urgency around reforming high school. You know, we can do all kinds of structural things, we can make all kinds of change, but if we don't also deal with some of the issues that all of us care about around phone addiction in teens, about the level of how disengaged they are as they're navigating, we also have to worry about them in addition to the structural changes that we heard. So that's actually perfectly timed for us to have that conversation, where right now you're going to hear from experts who have written a book called The Disengaged Teen. You're going to hear from Rebecca Winthrop, who's the author and director of the Center for Universal Education at Brookings, and Jenny Anderson, who co-author, a journalist and author of that book, are going to have a conversation about moving from passive to active. Think about your teens, think about all the challenges that you're seeing and how you can actually unlock and supercharge them to get them to be engaged in their own experience. So that's going to be moderated by Tiffany Taylor, who you're all welcome. She is the co-president of the ASU+GSV Summit. She's kind of a big deal. We're super excited to have her on here as a partner at ASU+GSV. So please join me in welcoming Jenny, Rebecca, and Tiffany.
All right, ladies. Well, I am so excited to be just back in conversation with the both of you, because everyone in this room knows that this is not simply a conversation about education. It's a conversation about the future of work, leadership, and opportunity. And we all know the headlines. 75% of third graders say they love school. By the time they get to the 10th grade, that number drops to 25%. Employers tell us that young people aren't prepared for the workforce, and colleges are struggling with persistence. So this conversation is going to be about a reframe. What if disengagement isn't just inevitable, but there's an opportunity to rethink how we ready our students for the future? So you talked to hundreds of students.
We surveyed 65,000 of them
Exactly.
with Transcend.
Exactly. So Rebecca, tell us a little bit more about what you learned, because I know disengagement isn't one size fits all. When students disengage, they tend to fall into 4 modes: resistor, passenger, achiever, and explorer. Talk to us a little bit about those modes.
So in our research, we found that kids really dig in, and we talk about engagement as motivation is internal, and engagement is what you do with that motivation. Yeah. I'm very motivated to go to the gym and work out. I do not want osteoporosis. My son is really worried about that, but I've not signed up for a gym. So I'm motivated, but not engaged. So we want kids to be engaged.
Yes.
And we found that they engage in these 4 different modes. The passenger mode is the most common in middle school and high school. Approximately half the kids say they have experiences in passenger mode. That's when they're coasting.
Yeah.
The achiever mode is when kids are really trying to get a gold star in everything that's put in front of them. They're pretty focused on the outcome, not the process. Resistor mode is when kids are avoiding and disrupting their learning. And explorer mode is where we want a lot of kids to spend time. It's where kids really love learning, where curiosity meets drive. They can really become unstoppable. We found that less than 4% of kids say they regularly spend time in explorer mode in middle school and high school. I will tell you one story because it's important. These modes are not identities. They're not labels. Kids move between them based on their environment.
Yeah.
So one of the characters that we have in the book is a young man named Mateo. He came to the US from the Dominican Republic. In 2nd grade, he was all into being a great student. It's what his family wanted. He was highly motivated and highly engaged, got straight A's, was full-on achiever mode.
Yeah.
Got to middle school, and it was pretty easy for him. He was pretty academically talented, and he had a math class where middle school math teacher said, hey, kids who want to do extra work can go on this app at home, and you get unlimited extra credit points for every math question you answer on the app at home. What did he do? Yeah, he literally sat there, calculated, didn't do a stitch of homework, not the entire year, did all extracurricular, did all the extra credit, thank you, and got an A in the class. And that was sort of a downward slide for him. He started getting really into passenger mode, was just sort of coasting, finding it the easiest way to do it. And then he just was so bored that he started looking for excitement. So this is where kids are dubbed the problem children. He became class clown. He kept interrupting, and then he stopped doing his homework, and then he started skipping class, and then after a while, he was skipping a lot of school. He skipped a lot of school. And then in 8th grade, he took a robotics elective, and it was the first time he said, I couldn't just hack the class because I was trying to figure out the answer. He got super excited, got super into it. There was a lot of experiential learning. He wasn't given the answer. He was exploring, got super motivated, went on to a big picture learning school. Fast forward, he got a full, massive Amazon Future Engineer Scholarship and is off in college for computer science. So engagement moves around.
I love that,
based on what we provide our kids.
And so, Jenny, achiever mode, right? So I'm a former teacher, and I loved my babies and still do, but that's what we've traditionally rewarded, right? You're meeting expectations, you are meeting the deadlines, you are achieving that gold star, and your work is telling us that we need to push back on that. Tell me a little bit more about why we have to push back on achiever mode.
Yeah, we all love achiever mode, right? I mean, parents love achiever mode. We feel like we're doing it all right. The whole world loves us. Teachers love it because they're telling us we're doing it all right. But there are a couple problems with achiever mode. What we found in our research is that these are kids who are striving for perfection, not excellence. And there's a cost to that. It is at all costs. And these kids have the highest rates of mental health problems of all the kids, more than resistor mode, more than the kids who are dubbed the problem children in the system. These are the kids who are really showing up with a lot of problems. So that's problem one. Problem two is that if you are always trying to get the right answer, you are not leaving a lot of room to be a creative problem-solving thinker. And I think in an age of AI, I mean, we're hearing quite a bit about AI here and what AI can do, which is, just about everything. We need kids who can think for themselves. What do I care about? What do I want? What can I do? And what do I actually care about, right? That internal introspection is not something achiever mode kids are particularly good at because they are so busy serving a system that is insatiable. They are trying to jump through every hoop, and there is no hoop now. There's no end to the hoops you can jump through. So achiever mode is, obviously, we want the organization skills, we want the work ethic, we want the discipline. That's happy achiever mode. But when we tilt into this unhappy achiever mode, this striving for perfection, there's a cost to it. And I think we have to just be really careful about that. And the explorer mode is what's going to help us in this age of AI.
When we started preparing for this conversation, we sat here for a moment, and I told you a little bit about what my dad taught me when I was growing up. So he said, struggling makes you strong, but never let anyone see you struggle. And so that has shaped how I showed up, as a young adult, as a teacher, as a leader. And it taught me resilience, but it also taught me to navigate the world instead of truly changing the world, right, and influencing the world. And so when I think about these 4 modes, the question that keeps coming back to mind is how do we ensure that we are preparing our students, no matter what their identity is, to change the world? How do the 4 modes really play into that?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we have is that the school system is not designed right now to help unlock the potential in every child. The system is designed still to sort and rank, and it's designed on a very narrow set of measures. And so when we talk about getting into explorer mode, you need multiple access points to get into that explorer mode, so we need to be designing for that explorer mode. When you ask, there's a big conversations happening right now about smartphones. Maybe you've noticed The Anxious Generation, very big book, and the argument there is that we have overprotected kids in the real world and underprotected them online. Could not agree more. Here, really happy, and here for a lot of the regulate big tech. Let's step up and get some controls here. But when you ask young people what stresses them out and what's making them unhappy, they do not say their smartphones, and it is not because they don't know. They say school. The thing that is making them most unhappy is having to succeed in a system that does not have meaning for them. And so we need kids, that last panel, the core principle, the core operating foundational principle is you have to want to do it, right? Once we get that unlocked, we can do a lot. And so we need to get to the why and get this unlocked in kids. And that is not, and this isn't the fault of teachers. We're very clear in our book. This is not the fault of teachers. They are stuck between a lot of accountability at the top and a lot of pressure from parents at the bottom who want, this is the system they have and they want their kids to succeed. So we really need to find more access points to let more kids succeed. And we do not mean by lowering expectations here at all. What we mean is more access points to explore moments.
I want to stay here just for a moment because we hear this all the time. It's the system. The system needs to change, but we know it takes time for systems to change. So, Rebecca, when you think about moving from what you all call this age of achievement to the age of agency, what should systems be doing to actually drive towards that goal?
So our big picture argument in the book is exactly what you said, Tiffany, for everybody who hasn't read it, is that our current education system is really stuck in the age of achievement, which is about ranking and sorting. And every school system, by the way, is like this around the world. So there's a long historical legacy as to why. But where we need to go, especially given an age of AI and this question on the last panel, in terms of I don't know what I'm preparing my young people for.
Yeah.
What we need to prepare young people to be able to do is to have agency.
Yeah.
That is what they need, and that is what Explore Mode is. And the ways to do it, there's a whole continuum from really systems need to work with families. This is not something a teacher in a classroom all by his or herself can solve on his or her own. Schools have to reach out to families because Explore Mode is built at home and in school, and you need families and parents and caregivers to be reinforcing what schools are doing. They need to partner up on that. So, training families about engagement and what they can do to help motivate and engage their kids at home, which is a lot. Another thing that we can do is really doubling down on autonomy supportive teaching in the classroom, regardless of who the school leader is, regardless of what your district policies are. Teachers actually can do a lot. Maybe we'll come back to that. A third thing we can really do is try to shift policies that we can do right away, which is around extracurriculars and giving more kids opportunity to go outside the school walls and touch, smell, and feel what they're learning hands-on, et cetera, career-connected learning, all types of school policies. Just short of, probably the real thing we need to do, which takes time, so you can do all these pieces, the real thing we need to do is full-scale school redesign.
So I want to stay here, but I want to connect to a point that, it made me laugh when we talked about it. When we had our first conversation, Jenny, you said your husband pushed you after he read the book. He loved it, for sure.
He had a lot of comments.
Had a lot of comments, but loved it. But we
took a lot of them, by the way.
Oh.
He's also a journalist.
Let's give a shout out to Jenny's husband for all the comments.
Thorold, we love you.
But what he pushed you on was wanting you to make sure that educators, workforce leaders, university presidents understood that driving towards agency didn't mean that you were sacrificing academic excellence, right? And as a former educator, as a stepmom, as a godmom, as someone who just deeply cares about our kids and their futures, like that resonates deeply with me. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that conversation with your wonderful husband?
It was a long, 3-year conversation, but yes. So it is a total myth that agency requires sacrificing rigor. Yeah. So we relied a lot on the research of, there are a lot of people doing great research in this field, but John Marshall Reeve does some extraordinary research in this field. He's done 35 randomized controlled trials in 18 countries, as varied as South Korea, very different from Peru, very different from the United States. Yeah. And what he found is that a number of practices that teachers use, and parents can use these too, result in producing agency in students, and that agency results in higher grades, better mental health outcomes, and more pro-social behaviors. And let's be very clear, these are exactly the skills kids are gonna need in the age of AI. This is what we're talking about. So it's the trifecta. They feel better, they learn better, and they are better prepared for a very uncertain world. We keep saying we don't know what kids need. They need to be resilient, adaptable learners. We need to be able to learn well, and that's what this agency is about. And those practices, I mean, I don't know, should we talk about the practices?
Let's do it, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, they're really kind of three main ones. Number one, acknowledge and validate, right? So kids are frustrated, they're pissed off, they don't like what they're doing. How was school? It was fine. What did you learn? Nothing. You know, how was science? It was boring. You know, you get all these answers. And instead of saying, hey, buck up, you got to do this. This is just the way it is. You know, we're remarkably resigned to the fact that school seems very, very boring to kids. Instead of that, we can say, yeah, you know, sometimes I'd rather not go to work. I'd like to spend time with my friends too. Explanatory rationale. But just like you get better at playing soccer by being on that field and practicing and getting better at soccer, going to school is helping your brain get smarter. You are practicing. Learning is hard, and it should hurt a little bit. And it's going to make you better, and it's going to help you succeed. And the number 3 thing he says is kids need choice, right? Kids feel school is done to them, especially teenagers, right? There's a lot of things that are happening neurobiologically in their brains. They are preparing to separate from us, preparing to go find a tribe, preparing to go find a mate in the world. And to do all those things, they need to make choices. And we wonder why they feel so apathetic in the world, because we haven't been giving them choices. So Reeves says in his research that if we acknowledge and validate, if we explain respectfully, and we give choice, kids will start becoming better decision makers. They will develop agency, and they will learn better, feel better, and live better.
I love that.
And just to add one factoid, because I love a stat.
Yes.
Adolescents today in the United States are subject to 2 times more rules than incarcerated fellows. So it's real.
Yeah. And so, you know, this room is filled with, we have educators, we have philanthropic leaders, we have policymakers, we have investors, entrepreneurs. And I know, Rebecca, you are constantly thinking about the system. And when you think about this mix, right, in this room, what should those leaders really be thinking about in terms of moving towards readying their environments for students who will have more agency or crave more agency?
Well, I think if I had to pick 2 or 3 levers for people to pull, one would be anything you can do to bring knowledge acquisition, which is a lot of what we spend time doing and is important. And I would say I've spent my career talking about knowledge acquisition isn't enough, content isn't enough, we need to apply it, we need transferable skills, and now with AI, I'm like, oh my God, we need content. Because how on earth are young people going to be able to assess whether what they're being served up with AI is even tethered to the real world? So knowledge acquisition, marry it with knowledge application. That can be small little things like, visited a school recently, 8th grade math, pre-algebra, they learned how to solve for X like we all do, and then they gave the 8th grade class a budget and they had to use the algebra they learned to figure out how many Halloween decorations to buy and negotiate, you know, how the cost of the Snickers bars, this, that, and the other. They were using algebra. Really great way to embed and transfer. Or it could be, you know, things like big picture learning or Iowa Big or a ton of great models out there that are doing knowledge application with paired with knowledge acquisition. So, and I don't think there's one model to do it. The second thing I would say, probably the second thing if I had to just pick 2, would be absolutely do everything you can to help kids find their spark. So we found, and there's great survey research out there on this, that the minute kids start slipping academically, remember that story of Mateo, who was like getting bored, and then he was looking for his own fun. That's when parents and schools take away enriched, interesting activities. You can't be on the football team. You haven't kept your grades up. You can't go do Model UN. You can't X, Y, and Z. And it's the opposite of what those kids need. We found that kids who slip into resistor mode, if you give them more autonomy, more freedom to pursue something they're interested in, they hop really quickly to explore mode, and then eventually it spills over to their academic life.
I love that. And Jenny, I'm going to give you our last 60 seconds. Look into the folks in this room. They just need one thing so they can actually get into action supporting our students.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to, just because we're at an AI conference. We're talking about, you talked about your dad and struggle, right?
Yes, yes.
To learn is to struggle. We have to struggle. We're talking a lot about tools to make things easier and faster and optimize. Like, learning is hard, and we have to lean into learning is hard. I think that is just a really, really important message. And that is part of getting to explore mode.
Yes.
We can do hard things, and so we should be struggling a little bit. And yes, we want technology to optimize some things, but the actual process of learning. So it shouldn't be invisible, which is what your dad said to you, right?
Yeah.
But he was right. Struggle makes you stronger, right? So we got to be celebrating that and showing that, even with all of these great technology tools we have. Kids do not learn at the speed of light. They do not. They learn slowly, and it's hard, and we need to celebrate that.
I love it. I love it. Well, Jenny and Rebecca, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's give them a round of applause. All right. Thanks, folks. That's it. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for navigating. So earlier we've had a conversation about bipartisanship and about policy change. Then we moved on to a conversation about how, once we've made those changes, how do we ensure that our teens are going to be engaged? But boy, there is nothing that matters more right now than we're thinking about that next phase in higher education and how it actually is going to adapt and evolve and change to make sure it's actually delivering value for when those engaged teens are going to be showing up. So there's no one else who I think you should have this conversation with or be able to learn from than the two folks who are going to come on here today. So we're going to have a conversation that's going to be around the degrees of impact. Now everyone's talking about college and affordability and ROI, and the person who's really leading the charge and enforcing and encouraging institutions to actually take this on and fix it and actually come up with solutions that meet the needs of Americans is Jamie Marasotis from the Lumina Foundation. They just unveiled a new, bold, and inspiring goal, and so this is going to be a fantastically timed conversation around redefining the value of higher education. So please join me in welcoming two of my great friends, Paul Fain, who's a longtime journalist who is at Work Shift, and Jamie Marasotis, who's the president and CEO of the Lumina Foundation.
Hey, everybody. So before we talk about the big goal, I want to take us back. You know, I've been covering...
Wayback Machine, great.
Right, it's great. I've been doing this journalism thing long enough to remember when graduation as a goal was a somewhat controversial topic. You know, I used to have visits from college presidents who would use that old line, tell me if you remember this, look to your left, look to your right, only one of you will make it. Also, even, we don't know why people go to college. You know, there are all sorts of reasons, but I think it's changed. I think that conversation has changed. Where do you see it now?
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. I mean, if you go all the way back to the GI Bill and post-World War II, we started an era of increasing access to post-secondary learning that continued for several decades. And in that era, you're right, the objective really was get them in the door. Getting them out the door wasn't nearly as important as getting them in the door. It was increasing the enrollment rates. It was getting a lot more people into the system. And then they had the chance to succeed, but it was up to them. That was really the model. And by the way, the access era did a lot of good, right? We did get a lot more people into the system, and we did increase enrollment very dramatically, and we did a reasonably good job of making sure that we started to increase the enrollment rates of people who historically had been shut out. Low-income populations, people of color, people with geographic barriers, lots of factors that came, and we started to see the leveling out by gender and other issues. So the access era was a good thing for America, but we didn't solve the access problem to higher education, and that's when this idea of increasing attainment came along, certainly in the work that we tried to lead at Lumina starting in 2008. So, you know, the access era, I think, got us to a certain threshold, but then we realized in the, mid-2000s that simply getting in the door wasn't enough, that people actually had to complete their credentials, and completion became sort of the objective of the system. Not that we had solved the access problem again, so it was access plus completion was really the objective of the attainment era. And one of the things I will say about the attainment era from 2008 to the present is that it is one of the least well understood large-scale social successes that we've seen in this country. Most people don't understand that between 2008 and 2023, we increased the attainment rate in the United States from 38% of Americans having a degree or other credential to 55%. That is an extraordinary change. It means millions of people not only got a credential, but they earned more money, they had greater job opportunities, they were able to contribute more to their communities. And that era is something I think we should celebrate as we face these new challenges that clearly we're facing in the system.
So we've got access, we've got completion, and truly, sincerely, congrats to Lumina and others who helped drive that change. But you've got a new goal. You have a new, looking forward, give us a sense of what the goal incorporates.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to recognize that the attainment movement was driven by a wide array of actors. Yes, Lumina and many other funders helped to sort of build the ecosystem and be catalysts for the change that was needed. But really what happened in terms of increasing attainment is that states stepped into the void. States began to work on setting goals, and states actually drove much of the large-scale change that was needed, working with colleges and universities, working with workforce training programs, working with national organizations and community-based organizations. This really was a movement, and the movement was driven by lots and lots of actors, which is why, in the moment that we're in, it's very important to understand that platform for what needs to come next, because what we're facing now is an era that I couldn't have envisioned. I pitched the idea of this goal, this 60% of Americans having a degree or other credential by 2025, when I interviewed for the job at Lumina Foundation. I pitched it to the board in 2007 and said, here's what I think we can do. And they were like, oh, sure, that sounds great. And that's what we set out to do, is to help build this ecosystem. But what we didn't have then was people saying, oh, costs are so expensive, I probably can't go. We didn't have people saying then, oh, I'm not sure that degrees matter. We didn't have people saying then, I'm not sure why I should do this, it's not clear to me what the relevance is. So we face lots and lots of headwinds, which is why, and this came up two discussions ago, which is why this era of value, I think, is so important, because we think that the era now that we are entering is, again, we didn't solve the access problem, but we got better. We didn't solve the attainment problem, but we got better. But now we need to deliver on credentials of value. And our new goal for the country is that by 2040, we want to see 75% of the US labor force with a degree or credential of value that leads to economic prosperity. And there's a lot to sort of unpack in that. It's 21 words. It took us 2 years to think through. There's a lot that goes into that, and lots of new ecosystem building on what had been accomplished in the past that I think is really important. But clearly, the core of this is these credentials of value and ensuring that all post-secondary providers, whoever they are, can actually deliver on the value that Americans expect, that employers expect, and that the country really needs in order to meet its talent needs.
I'm glad you brought up the states as laboratories of this work. I think, if there's one state that I think we're all watching very closely for how to determine credentials of value, it's Texas. Really interesting funding formula in place. How do you see, where are we in the process of, I know
You've got to have good data to determine credentials of value. There's a lot that goes into it. Just give us a sense of what you think kind of best practices will be as states work on that.
Yeah, one of the things that we learned in building the original goal is that you've got to build the bicycle as you're riding it, right? So when we actually first set out in 2008 to help catalyze the country towards the 60% attainment goal, the only thing we could count in 2008 was degrees. We couldn't count certificates, we couldn't count certifications, so we couldn't count these non-degree credentials, which we now understand are extremely important in the post-secondary learning ecosystem, and particularly for adults. We often talk about education and the reform of the education system through this lens of traditional age learners, but in fact, we know more than 2 out of every 5 people enrolled in American higher education today is an adult over the age of 25. They're working, they are parents, they have lots and lots of responsibilities that are extremely important that I think somehow, particularly our policymakers, haven't fully wrapped their heads around. They think that they're all in community colleges, or they think that it's a sort of separate system that serves them. No, they're the lifeblood of many of the post-secondary institutions in this country. States, I think, though, have a challenge when it comes to helping to deliver on these credentials of value, because they have some significant measurement problems in understanding what value really means. What we are doing, and sort of building the bicycle as we ride it, is saying that the initial threshold of determining value is wages. It is a necessary but not sufficient threshold. And the percentage that we are using is built on some of the work that we've seen in Texas and some other place, which is a 15% premium above those with a high school credential. That may not sound like much, but a 15% premium actually over time adds up to a great deal in terms of overall income and therefore capacity to be successful in work and in life. But when you apply that 15% premium, you take the attainment rate, as I described it before, from 55% to 44%. So that in and of itself, so that means the sort of reset baseline is that we've got to get from 44% of credentials of value to 75% by 2040. And I think states, again, will be really critical in this. But to be clear, I think that wages is not enough, that we've actually got to think about lots and lots of other measures that lead to economic prosperity, both in the traditional sense, meaning wealth and other things, but also in terms of community impact and the broader ways in which we expect Americans not only to get a good job, but to have a good life. And having a good life means not only for themselves, but contributing to their community, contributing to the country. And this idea of credentials of value, I think, is really sort of the new watchword, the new way in which we should be thinking about what the post-secondary learning system does.
Sticking with like the nuanced measure, community value, at times can be at conflict, I think, with the wage threshold. I know this is a tough question, but thinking about jobs in allied health, early child care that pay a poverty wage and yet society needs. Not an easy one here, but how do you account for those sort of roles and encourage systems that bring people up, given that they're going to start in jobs that are poverty level?
Yeah, this is one of the reasons. Well, first of all, we have a wage problem in this country, and that's very clear, right? That the wage problem that we have in the labor market is part of the reason why we see some of these tremendous disparities. But one of the things, I wrote a book in 2020 called Human Work in the Age of Smart Machines, and part of what I was trying to get at in my book was to answer the question, what are the humans going to do in an increasingly technology-mediated world? Keep in mind, this is pre-ChatGPT, though we sort of knew these large language models were coming, and pre a lot of what we're now seeing in terms of the rapid changes at a societal level. And one of the things that I think is really important is to understand that we've got to prepare people not just for the now, but for the next. And by that I mean that we've got to make sure that they are prepared not just for the high-skill, tech-oriented jobs of the present, but the jobs of the near future that are going to require an enhancement of our human capabilities, our ability to be empathetic, to be caring, to be ethical, all of these things that are extremely important. Those things, Paul, really need to go into these conversations about what people need to be prepared for. Yes, we need to give people family-sustaining wages. Yes, we need to actually have them focus on what really matters in terms of stability in their families. But stability should not be a sort of sufficient goal. We should aspirationally believe that people should have prosperity. And prosperity comes not only from making more money, but having a fuller life. And that means being a part of your community and driving change in that community and contributing not only to what your own well-being is, but to the success of others. And so, lots and lots of these words, prosperity, flourishing, well-being, lots of these things are an important part of this equation. All of that has to be delivered, at least in part, through the higher education, through the post-secondary learning system. I just think that's essential for us to meet our needs as a society, to drive our democracy, and to improve our shared well-being.
As you know well, it's not a debate about degrees versus short-term credentials, it's both. But thinking about the short-term credential as a stepping stone, maybe the stability that you get from that first credential and job. What really makes it work as a system is if they're stackable. If folks can build on that entry-level credential, get credit for what they do on the job. I think it's safe to say we're not there as a system yet, that stackability is widespread. Are you optimistic that we will get there?
Yeah, I think so, and I'd love to lose the word stackable, by the way, because I think stackable implies that there's sort of a specific linearity associated with it. It's more like a handoff, right? The handoff really is that you should be developing, as you said, some core competencies and skills in certain areas that you can get through these non-degree credentials, through these certificates or certifications, lots of other things that we haven't invented yet, aggregations of badges, and lots of these things I think are in the works or to come, that I think are really important. But really this idea that over the course of a human work life cycle, we actually have to continue to learn all the way through that is really important. And educators love to call this lifelong learning. It's a term that we've tested with consumers. They hate the term. It sounds terrible to them. It sounds like a sentence. So we need to figure out a way to talk about it in a different way to the consumers. But I think the idea here is that it is this virtuous cycle, right? You're learning, you're earning, you're serving others. You're learning, you're earning, you're serving others. That, to me, is what prosperity is all about. And from my vantage point, I think it's going to be essential that we think about this ecosystem as being a handoff of these different credentials over time. That allow people to continue to grow and prosper. And I will say one thing about the shorter term credentials, because I think there's been a lot of focus in recent years as an either or, and I think that is bad. I think it is bad not only for consumers, but I think it is bad for the labor market. I think we actually need people who can enter the labor market and earn those family sustaining wages, but we know the nature of work is changing so rapidly that you could envision an environment where people would have to just keep doing these shorter term credentials over and over and over again. And I don't think that would be very satisfying for anyone. I think they've got to sort of get to these higher levels that both advance their sort of specific, what I would call technical skills or job-oriented skills, but also build their longer term, generalizable skills that allow them to move up the ladder. And I've written a lot about this recently, about lots and lots of people who have these like liberal arts degrees, another term that's been sort of out of fashion now, these liberal arts degrees that go into technical fields and they advance very quickly. Why? Because they work well in teams, because they can communicate well with other people. They've got lots of these talents that they've developed previously, then they match it with the more technically oriented skills, and it gives them this tremendous ability to actually advance much more rapidly.
Jamie, we'll have to end it there. Thanks so much. You covered a lot of ground in a very brief amount of time. Please give it up for Jamie Maracetis.
All right. Well, now we get to round the bases. So we've had fantastic conversations, and that was a really riveting discussion around the value of higher education and how it can evolve. But now we need to think about the future, and specifically about how we're creating the kinds of resources and support we're going to need, and how AI can actually be part of that. So today, join me in welcoming a conversation around AI, emotional intelligence, and innovation, and how we can build mental health tools for humanity. This is going to be moderated by Larissa May, who is the founder and executive director of Half the Story. Thank you so much for coming on. Mark Brackett, who is a research psychologist from Yale University. James Regan, who is the general manager of How We Feel. And Ben Silberman, who's the co-founder and executive chairman of Pinterest. All right, welcome them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're sitting at a moment in time where human intelligence and artificial intelligence are at war. But when brilliant technologists, researchers, and visionaries come together, we can design technologies that help move humanity forward. So Ben, this is not your first rodeo. You started with Pinterest, building the most inspirational corner of the internet. And now you've gone on to build How We Feel, which, without any marketing, has had over 2 million downloads in the App Store. It was also named the Social Impact App of the Year by Apple in 2022. That is a phenomenal feat. Your vision has always been to build world-class tools to help people learn about themselves. When it comes to feelings, you have to actually believe that feelings matter. And so before we even get into today's conversation, can you ground us in why you created How We Feel and what How We Feel actually gives us the permission to access and identify our feelings?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us. Thanks for coming to our session. Appreciate it. So look, I think that like self-understanding and self-knowledge, it's kind of the foundation of your connection with other people, with your ability to sort of operate properly in the world. And I think that there are so many tools out there to understand what everyone else's opinion is and what everyone else feels, but there aren't as many tools that are really designed to understand what you feel and how you should navigate the world. And so I think there's just this really exciting opportunity to use technology, not to distract you or to focus you on what's going on outside, but to help you understand what's going on inside so that you can take lessons away and navigate the world in a more wise way and build better connections and find more success in whatever you choose to do.
In many ways, you went from Pinterest to now How We Feel, which is really focused on development from the inside out, whereas traditional technologies is focusing on how others feel about you. And James, can you maybe give us a little preview into How We Feel and how it actually works?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lars. So How We Feel is a free app designed to help people build emotional intelligence skills in a structured and science-backed way. And the 3 value propositions of the app are that it helps you expand your emotional vocabulary. We use this really neat, artful mood meter that we'll show in a minute. So you can go beyond the words just meh, or good, or fine, or okay to describe what you're feeling and accurately get to the right word. The second value proposition is the app helps you learn strategies and tools for regulating those emotions, whether that means calming down, or getting unstuck, or savoring an emotional state. And the third value proposition is that we help you spot patterns in your emotional well-being over time. So you can start to see the connection between how you feel and what's happening in your life, your relationships, and your environment. And you can see a little preview of the app up here on the screen.
Thanks, James. Now, Mark, the ruler approach has been implemented in over 5,000 schools, and by creating How We Feel, that's been implemented alongside that to actually support students and educators. Why is it so important to actually have not only the vocabulary to define your emotions, but also the skills to regulate yourself? And how does the tool actually do that?
Yeah, so let me just ask everyone a question. How many of you like to be around people who are unemotionally self-aware and not skilled at dealing with their feelings? How many of you are like, yes, that's who I want to marry, that's who I want to work with? So I think the motivation is pretty obvious, in terms of the why. These are skills that we know matter for all aspects of our lives, from our ability to focus, whether it be at home or at school or at work, our ability to make sound decisions, our ability to maintain healthy relationships. Certainly, it's the backbone of our mental and physical health. And then finally, just attaining the goals we have in life. Life is filled with emotions that oftentimes get in the way of our success. So I think that's just at the heart of the app. What was your second part of the question?
I mean, really, I was just wondering how you do that, and also how you actually, through the app, give people the skills that they need to deal with their emotions, because naming them is part one. But then once you know you're feeling anxious or depressed, you actually have to know what to do about it.
Yeah, and sometimes it is doing nothing, which is okay, because you don't always need to regulate. But so the tool, when you get to use the tool, it's on both Android and iOS. The heart of the tool is this tool we call the mood meter, which is based in science, which basically says that how we feel at any given moment is a product of two dimensions. The first is pleasantness. So take a moment right now and just ask yourself, how pleasant are you? -5 would mean that you're the most unpleasant you've ever been. Hopefully you're not there. -3 I call everyday misery. Then you got neutral, maybe +3 in pleasantness, or +5. You're just like, you're looking at us and you're thinking, I have no words for this experience. So where are you right now? Honestly, can you just give yourself a number? On the y-axis, it says energy. Technically, it's activation level. So do you feel energized or do you feel depleted? What is your body telling you right now? What are you feeling in your body? What are you feeling in your mind? And essentially what we do with the mood meter is we cross these two axes and we have these 4 quadrants, the yellow, the red, the blue, and the green. And as you can see here from the picture, yellow emotions are high energy, pleasant feelings like happy, excited, elated, hopeful. Green emotions are pleasant but lower in energy, calm, content, tranquil, peaceful, relaxed. The red and the blue, I'm going to say up front, are unpleasant emotions, not bad, not negative. The red is the anxiety and the anger family, and the blue would be the sad kind of disappointment family. And so the step that we take first is build that vocabulary, build that self-awareness, and then decide, do I need to stay or do I need to shift? And then we provide strategies to do that.
Well, I think technology at its best can really help augment and enhance the human experience. And one of the things that I loved when I first started using How We Feel was the social aspect of it. And I know, Ben, your work at Pinterest and beyond has always been designing products that help people ultimately become more inspired and learn more about themselves, but you've always been very conscious about incorporating research at the heart of that. And so I'd love to hear either from you or James a little bit more about the social aspect of How We Feel, and then ultimately how you're seeing users use that in their everyday lives.
Yeah, I can take the question on how we're seeing people use it. So we've seen a wide range of people come to How We Feel, each with their own different need and goal. But broadly speaking, they fall within a few key groups. There are those that come to the app that are looking to connect more deeply with maybe one other person or their family. And those people are able to share emotions in the app with somebody else if they want to. There are those using the app in collaboration with a caregiver. They're not exclusively using the app to share their emotions with their caregiver, whether that's a counselor or a therapist or a coach. But what they are using the app for is in between those sessions to get a little bit more of an objective understanding of where their emotional well-being is at. And I know this is specifically focused more on the social features, so I'll just say that you can share in the app, but it's not something you need to do with the app.
Now, one of the other things that we were talking about a little earlier, which I found to be really fascinating, is the idea that by using How We Feel or technology and AI in the right way, that you can actually have power or design your own emotional life. And I think for a lot of kids, when we're living in a world of technology where most kids are scrolling more than they're sleeping, walking, or socializing, that feels almost impossible. Can you talk a little bit about the science of that and how you're weaving that into the consumer experience?
Sure. I think, you know, one of the great things about having an app to check in with your feelings is that, you know, we have terrible memories for how we have felt over the last couple of days, the last couple of weeks. And by using a tool like How We Feel, it takes about a minute or two to check in. And you can set reminders once a day, twice a day, 3, 4 times a day. And then it aggregates your data over time. And I think what happens for a lot of people is that they're surprised. As a matter of fact, a lot of people say, you know, I just thought I was a lot less happy. I thought it was more miserable. And actually, now that I look at my data, I'm actually in a better place than I thought I was. So I think that is just really important for people, that our memory of how we feel is biased by how we're feeling in the moment. So if we're feeling miserable today, we think, oh, I've been feeling this way for weeks, but it's not necessarily the case. And maybe Ben, you want to add to that?
Well, I think that part is that self-awareness. I mean, we get write-ins all the time on both sides of it. Like we get write-ins. I remember one father wrote in. He's like, I'm a pretty chill person, except right after work, which happens to be like when my kids are at home. And seeing the data made me realize, like, wait a minute, like I might see myself as a very relaxed, chill person, but my kids see me as this really stressed out person, and that's not the person that I want to be. And so I need to come up with some kind of strategy to help me go into it. And so the first step is just providing that level of almost psychological distance through the process of checking in and through precise naming. And then what a lot of people write in with the app now is that after they've taken that first step, we've introduced a very lightweight AI feature, which will then ask you the second question. Why are you feeling that way? How are you looking at that situation? And it seems really simple. I think we've all had that experience. A friend comes to us for relationship advice, and when you're outside of it, it's so much easier to see it clearly than when you're inside of it. And I think actually the same is true with ourselves. And so something about that process of externalizing it and having an AI then ask you follow-up questions. And it doesn't tell you how you're supposed to feel or what you're supposed to do. It reflects back to you what you're saying, but allows you to sort of engage your cognitive capacity to think about it a little bit more objectively. And I think that's really exciting. I think that most of the time people spend on their phone is without intention and is mindless. I think that everyone relates to this feeling, like you wake up, like you haven't had coffee, like you reach for your phone, and you're like 4 emails, like 2 texts, like 5 tweets in, and all of these external forces have dictated in some ways like how you felt and what you're thinking about, even before you've had a chance to literally get out of bed. And there's one school of thought, which is everyone should just shut off their phone all the time, which I just don't see it happening. And then there's another school of thought, which is could we build tools that actually help you understand yourself better and develop that self-control and self-understanding and teach you those skills and strategies. And we're more in that second camp. I'm all for people turning off their phone as well. I think that's great, but I don't think it's realistic. I think what's more realistic is giving people the tools internally that they learn and then applying it into other spheres of their life.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because in a lot of the work that we do, we really see and are in that second camp that technology is a social determinant of public health. And for kids in places, especially in communities that have less resources, being able to use technology in things like how we feel that help you tune into yourself and your world in a better way is a very clear example of what active and positive and mindful tech consumption is. And we do need to move away from this world where abstinence in tech is going to work, because we know for kids it certainly doesn't. So how we feel is a great way to mindfully engage. Now, we did talk about, okay, the first step, taking us through this, knowing that our feelings matter, actually naming them. I think what we see with how we feel and what's really important is that it is a nonprofit, which means that you are not building a tool where the time is the bottom line for whether or not the product actually exists. And when you look at a lot of these AI tools that are coming out when it relates to emotional intelligence, there's a lot of danger around trying to replace humans, trying to say that you are this AI that can solve all of the problems for regardless of where you're sitting in the equation. But what I'm really curious about is through this, you're getting a lot of data and you are learning a lot. And I'm curious how we feel, Mark, kind of going back to Ruler, how that is impacting your design, development, and iteration of that, and what are some of the key takeaways that you're getting?
Well, I think we are learning that people are not that emotionally literate. And so we're trying to train people to build that vocabulary. And that's important. I think people underestimate the value of emotional self-awareness. The best example I have is, I'm a professor by day, and I have students who have the highest SAT scores out of any place in the world, and they don't know the differences between anxiety and stress. And as a matter of fact, my students a couple of years ago, I'm stressed, and fine, I understand that you could be stressed, but I said, journal about, what's going on. What's the, we have a part of our app where you can journal about why you're feeling the way you're feeling, like the questions that Ben mentioned. And all of a sudden, the themes around their stress were not really about having too many demands and not enough resources. They weren't about uncertainty around their future. It was all about social comparison. This one's richer than me. This one's got more connections than I have. This one, has better lips. This one has better hips. I mean, literally, it was all about everyone else being better than they were. And so I went back to my students and I said, what do you think the emotion word is that's actually describing your feelings? And it was envy. They could not believe, that they were living in envy. And then, just a quick story about this, I went to the counseling center and I said to them, what's our university's envy reduction program? And I was glad I had tenure when I said that. But it wasn't popular because, we like quick fixes. And I think what we're trying to build is a tool that gives people, really great self-awareness, but then also we have, as we mentioned, lots of strategies in there. And, we're gonna map those strategies onto different feelings. So, for example, when you're anxious, maybe taking a deep breath will help, but probably you're gonna need some cognitive strategies. Mark, you have no control over that, giving yourself that ability to reframe. Whereas when you're feeling envy, it might be something completely different.
Thank you for sharing. One of the key pieces of this tool is the ability to actually spot patterns. And as leaders, whether it be in a school environment or a professional environment, you have to be really thinking about the opportunity cost of the investment or the time that you're putting into creating or implementing a new tool. Can you talk about some of the contexts outside of the educational setting that people are using How We Feel for, and how you're actually analyzing the success or how it's helping them with managing their workforces?
I can take a stab at this question. So just to take a step back and just explain a little bit more about How We Feel. I know that we've talked about it being a nonprofit organization. It's a free app. I think it's important here just to note for the audience that there's very limited data collection whatsoever. By default, all of the data is stored on device. When you create an account with How We Feel, if you want to create an account, it's not backing up your data to the cloud. So just please keep that in mind as we talk about how people are finding use with the app. I mentioned that there are these key groups of people that we see using the app. We've seen people using the app with a significant other, right? They're doing more of like a one-to-one sharing. We've seen people using the app to share within groups. We also see people who are just really curious about emotional intelligence. Maybe they want to become an emotion scientist. One of the strategies that we have in the app is a video series about going from an emotion judge to an emotion scientist. We built that in collaboration with Mark's team. Another key group that we see come into the app is people who are trying to optimize for a facet of their life. So I think this really gets to the question you're having here about how might people be using this in different contexts. A couple months ago, we spoke to a professional runner who is using the app to try to understand how his emotional well-being impacts his performance with his athletics. Our app's listed on the MBA Cares website, so we do see people who are trying to connect their emotional well-being to the goals that they have, whether those are goals for their workplace, whether those are goals for their social well-being, or just their overall day-to-day well-being. You also asked a question here about how we're maybe doing research or making connections behind that. That's something that we've been talking with Mark and his team about. We don't have anything implemented in the app today that would help us understand what that direct connection is between the app usage and certain outcomes. We are really curious about that, and people have actually asked us if they can support us in that way. They're curious about being these citizen scientists that can have their data going to the greater good. We've just been very cautious about approaching that path.
Well, I'm glad that you are being cautious, because many people are racing at lightning speed without any caution or really thinking about what the opportunity cost is for humanity, which is why we're here to hopefully create an opportunity for all of you to participate and use How We Feel in your environments. One thing that I've been thinking a lot about is this concept of time. And many leaders feel like it's the number one thing that they don't have. Kids are constantly racing for the next thing. There's more pressure than ever. How much time does it take to actually tune in with yourself and make a change that over time will support you in your everyday life?
About a minute.
Wow, only a minute.
I mean, it can take longer if you want to do some deep reflection, but the point of the app is to really train people to make this a habit. And so for me, you know, I'm very emotionally aware, at least I think I am. My family may say otherwise. And, you know, once you start understanding, like taking that complexity, it's overwhelming for a lot of people in the beginning. Like, I've never really been precise about how I've felt. I say fine, good, okay, or blah. And now we're saying, no, get granular. There's 144 words. That takes time to learn those words, those definitions. But once you do, it really is quite liberating, because it's just, you automatically say, oh, I'm in that red quadrant, I'm high red, I'm enraged. I'm in that green quadrant, I'm feeling content. I'm in that blue, I'm not really sad, I'm disappointed. No, I'm not disappointed, I'm feeling hopeless. I'm, you know, whatever it might be. And that is important. I want to get one anecdote that I have related to the use of the app. You know, we have a phrase in our center that we say you have to name it to tame it. Other people have used that phrase too. But one thing that's interesting about our emotions is that they mostly impact our choices and our behavior unconsciously. I mean, think about it for a minute. How many of you have ever been mean or cruel to somebody? Be honest, come on. And how many of you in that moment of saying, like, I hate you, you thought to yourself, gosh, I'm having a strong feeling right now that's driving my nasty behavior. Like, that's just not the way we operate. It's like, boom, we get hijacked and we go for the jugular. What we know from research is that if you take a moment to just, like, you've had a rough day at work, you take a minute, take a deep breath, check in on the mood meter. Well, what's cool is that once you attribute your emotion to its actual cause, it no longer will have that subconscious influence over the behavior. So to me, that's amazing, to help people build awareness that then changes their relationships and their behavior.
In the spirit of awareness, I like to say that the opposite of artificial intelligence is infinite awareness. And as we're building at the speed of light, one of the big things, or the things that really keeps me up at night, is if we're implementing this technology not only in schools but in workforces, how do we ensure that the technology that we're creating is actually emotionally competent? Because if we're implementing these things early on, middle school, elementary school, I think we all saw the halls filled with AI this, tutor, friend, XYZ 1, 2, 3. How do we actually make sure that these are being designed for humans? And Ben, I'm sure you're thinking a lot about this, as this is something that you've crossed before it and you're building at Pinterest. And I'm curious, what do you think the future is, and how can we ensure that artificial intelligence becomes more human?
That's a big question. I think right now we're really in the early days of artificial intelligence. I think that it almost seems impossible to imagine. I think in some ways it's underhyped how much it's going to change a lot of our day-to-day behaviors. And some of those things will be good and some won't be good, but like technology doesn't have a moral compass. It's just technology. I think with how we feel, what I'm really interested in helping people do is develop the skills to be a fully functional human being on their own. And I think emotional skills in particular feel like woefully behind in terms of people's awareness and education of them. My parents are doctors and my sisters are doctors. And it's funny because like physical wellness only became like a thing in the 1970s. Like wellness as a word was like this hippy-dippy Northern California thing. Illness is what you focused on. And these hippies were like, wellness is the antonym of illness, and we're gonna all study that. And now it'd be crazy to think that kids and adults wouldn't be educated on what you should eat, on why physical movement is important. And today, everyone hears about mental illness, right, as this massive, massive social harm. All the stats support it. But this idea of like what is mental wellness or emotional wellness still feels kind of like physical wellness in the 1970s. And so I think that where AI can help is it can accelerate people's self-understanding and their ability to navigate these things on their own. And I think where it can send people in the wrong direction is it can become a codependent companion where people start using it as a replacement for pro-social behaviors. You know, I talked to someone the other day, they're like, you know, loneliness is a huge problem. The Surgeon General was talking about it. And I was like,
I'm with you. And they're like, and so we've got a solution. We're gonna let you talk to this AI, you know, and they'll be your best friend, and they'll get to know you. They're like, what could go wrong? I was like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of shit could go wrong. And so I think that when I think about it, I think one, there has to be some sort of very crisp, like humanist goal. And with how we feel, that goal is to teach you these skills. So eventually you don't have to use the app. Like our goal is not to make you like a daily active user in perpetuity. I think there has to be a business model that's aligned with that goal, which is quite important. And if you think about broadly consumer internet, there are only a few business models, right? There's pay for it. There's use it and we'll sell you something else. That's the advertising model. And then there's use it and the data will be used for other things. And I think none of those feel like a great business model for this kind of software, because we don't want you to have it be inaccessible if you can't afford it. We don't want to be selling your emotional data, and it doesn't feel like the right place to be advertising things, and that's why it's set up as a nonprofit. So I think the two things that I think about are being very crisp on the goal, building a business model that aligns to it, and then periodically measuring what is the actual impact of the software, because like any technology, there are unintended impacts, and we can make technology better, you know, over time. Like it took a while to put seatbelts in cars. Now we have seatbelts. It's way better. And similarly, it'll take a while to figure out what are the dangers of new technologies, but people have to be very committed to being transparent about what those risks are. Otherwise, you can't build better solutions towards that end.
I mean, we haven't passed a legislation nationally in almost 30 years that protects young people. So we're very far behind on the seatbelts. And at this point, it's up to the technologists to make those decisions, which luckily you made a lot of those good ones at Pinterest, but we don't have a world that really holds us accountable in that way. So as we wrap this up, I'd love to hear, looking forward for how we feel, where it is today, where it is tomorrow. I'd love to hear what's on your roadmap. What do you envision? I know that customers are asking for new features every day, but I'd love to hear from you. What can we all be looking forward to?
Yeah, I'll start with that. And also want to invite the audience to check in. Mark, I know you said it would take about a minute, so we'll see if that's the case. First, on the roadmap, we're really curious about how we can still connect these emotional regulation strategies and tools to emotional check-ins. So when they're needed, what will be most applicable? How can we help people? We're still iterating on the very few features we have with artificial intelligence. Just to make this really quick, there are two features. One is this question feature, which again, is more of a guided journaling. It's only gonna ask you to go a little bit deeper for your own self-awareness. It's not gonna tell you how to feel. It's not gonna give you advice. And the other AI feature is just summarizing information for you. So those are the two near-term things that we're gonna continue working toward. And long-term, really excited to help people try to make more connection between what they're feeling emotionally and some of these sensations they have. Is somatic check-in is what we refer to it as. But I'll pass it to Mark and Ben because maybe they have a couple other things to want to add.
I'm excited because we're going to have people opt in to do research, and so we're going to really understand who this app is working for, how it's working for them. So for example, is it 1 or 2 check-ins a day? Is it 3 or 4 check-ins a day? Is it getting more granular with your vocabulary? Is it using the regulation strategies? And so we'll be able to look at all these data, and then we're incorporating measures of social well-being, psychological well-being, purpose and meaning in life to really examine the impact of the app's use on people's lives.
So really, I think the call to action here is to use technology as a window into your children's worlds, your partner's worlds, your fellow community members' worlds, because when it's used the right way, we can help understand each other better. So I encourage you all, if you haven't yet, download How We Feel. Give yourself permission to feel something. Maybe strike up a conversation with someone you love. And also, if you have ideas, How We Feel is a nonprofit. Please reach out to James at howwefeel.org. Share if you want to bring How We Feel into your company, educate new up-and-coming employees. I find that this is incredibly critical for recent graduates entering the workforce. They're all ears, and I'm here to be their champion. So thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate you and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Lars.
Thanks, everybody.